Thanks a lot for clearing everyone out, Cicely. Amy sighed. They were supposed to stay and set up their workstations for Monday. What has to be done? Arnold asked, and Amy told him everything that the six of them needed to have access to at their workstations in order to perform all of the tasks they would be required to do. If they had everything at hand, they wouldn't disrupt the class by leaving their projects to get what they needed. Arnold nodded and asked where the items were stored, and Amy pointed out the various cabinets, drawers, and display shelves with the required items, and in 10 minutes he had one workstation done. Then he started constructing the other 5 workstations. Annie didn't regret letting the young woman essentially drag her to a nice little coffee shop that was just off of the campus grounds. They bought their own drinks and sat down, and Diane told her all about herself. She was part of a rich family and they didn't care what she did with her life, since they had all the money they would ever need and she could live any way that she wanted. When Diane was old enough to understand what that meant, she was surprised that her parents wouldn't mind if she wasted her life, if that was what she wanted to do. She looked through everything that the local college had to offer and chose one of the hardest courses they offered. It was brutal and required a lot of studying, and she had taken to it like a duck to water. With her parents not pressuring her, she could do it at her own leisure, so she tackled the challenge head-on. "I'm glad that you decided to challenge yourself instead of just wasting away in your mansion," Annie said. "You seem like a smart girl and not using your brain would be a real shame." "That's what I told my mother and she just did a fake little laugh and told me to have fun," Diane said and laughed herself. "My parents are great people, but they just don't understand me." Annie chuckled. "A lot of children can claim that. Not Arnold, though," Diane said. "You understand him perfectly, don't you?" Annie was caught off guard. "No, not perfectly." Diane reached across the small table and took her hand. "Why don't you tell me about it?" I recently lost my husband in an accident." Annie started to tell this woman she just met, all about the problems she had. How her whole world had started to fall apart, how Arnold was now the responsible one in the family and had to work to support them, and how he had to move out to do that. Annie let out a sigh. "It's almost too much for one person to handle. Which is why Arnold having to do this bothers you so much," Diane said, and she nodded. "I can try to keep an unobtrusive eye on him if you like." "Oh, I couldn't ask you to do that," Annie said and looked down at their clasped hands. Almost as if Diane could tell what she was thinking, she leaned in close. "I'm trying to stop you from running away," Diane whispered. "I'm not running," Annie whispered back. "You look like a scared little rabbit about to be caught." Diane smiled. "You are trying to catch me, though," Annie countered. Diane bit her lip to stop her laugh. "I really am. And I'm really flattered." "Really?" Annie said. I told you that nothing has to happen," Diane said. "We're just two friends out sharing a nice beverage together and catching up on old times." Annie snorted and then laughed. "You have old times." "Ha ha. That was a cute snort," Diane said and then laughed her girlish laugh. "That usually means you're comfortable around someone and can let yourself laugh as hard as you want." "Really?" Annie asked and thought about it. She was pretty sure she had laughed like that around Kelly, and that made her smile. "I'm glad, even if it's something you just made up." Diane laughed again. "It's reassuring, isn't it? To have that comfortable feeling." Annie nodded. "And now our date has come to an end," Diane said and let her hand go as she turned her coffee cup upside down. "I need to get you back to campus before your son and his girlfriend start to worry that I've absconded with you for nefarious purposes." Annie snorted and laughed, which made Diane laugh her girlish laugh, and the two of them left the coffee shop. Not surprisingly, Annie felt a dainty hand take hers as soon as they had left the shop and started to walk back to the campus. They made it back to the dorm room building Arnold was assigned to and Diane stopped just outside of it. It was very nice meeting you. Diane said. It was nice meeting Annie stopped when Diane gave her a quick kiss on the lips. Diane, That was just a friendly thank you. Diane said. I find you very interesting. I'm flattered, really. Annie said. You said that before. Diane said with a smile. It's okay. Like I told you, nothing has to happen. That wasn't nothing. You just kissed me. Annie said. Diane laughed. That wasn't really a kiss. She said and leaned in and gave her a real kiss for several seconds. That was a real kiss. Annie stood there with her mouth slightly open and a surprised look on her face. Why you? Tongue. Did I just steal your first kiss with another woman? Diane asked with a warm smile, then she blushed. I'm very happy to be your first. Annie stammered and her face went red as well. Diane laughed her girlish laugh again. I really enjoy meeting interesting people. She said and took a step back and held on to Annie's hand for a moment, then she took another step back and she had to let go. I hope to see you again someday. She said as their hands slipped away from each other. Annie watched the bleached blonde young woman walk away and didn't know what to say. After about a minute, she gave her head a little shake and then went inside the dorm building to help Kelly unpack. What about your workstation? Arnold asked when he was done of the other place settings. I can do my own when it's time. Amy said and walked over to the front of the class and opened a drawer in the professor's desk and took out a clipboard with several sheets of lined paper on it. We need to do an inventory of everything. She said and handed the clipboard and a pencil to Arnold. Start here at the front right cabinet and record and count every piece of equipment and item that you see inside. Oh, and grade its quality, too. We need to know what has to be replaced. Arnold took the clipboard and went to the first cabinet and started to write down everything he could see, how many there were, and he picked each item up to record the conditions from new to good to needs replacing. That's going to take you a while, so Cicely and I will leave you alone. Amy said and led her friend out of the classroom and over to the lobby. Shoo. Arnold doesn't know that he just has to mark the items on a sheet. Amy said. Plus, this is a little payback for what he said about me to the professor. I knew you looked extra fake happy when you came into the room. Cicely said and sat down on a bench at the side of the room. So, hit me with it. Amy sat down and told her about what happened and Cicely's mouth fell open in surprise. Okay, that boy's got big balls. Cicely said. He insulted you and your work ethic right in front of the professor, and he got away with it. I know. Amy said and she took a breath to stay calm. So, I'm going to show him that as a senior assistant, he has to do everything I say. Farina, you can't. Cicely said. He warned you that you can't use him like that. Amy smiled. The professor put me in charge of teaching him all of the physical setups and cleaning procedures, since those are standard and don't change. Cicely caught her breath and put a hand on her friend's arm. Amy, don't. Amy blinked her eyes for a moment, because Cicely never used her chosen name. I'm absolutely positive that you don't want to make him angry. Don't worry. I've got a lot more pull with the professor than Arnold does. I meant the professor. Cicely said. You know what he's like. He chose this kid from high school for an advanced position as an assistant, sight unseen and above the rest of us, then enrolled him in the master's course without having him take the prerequisites first. That doesn't mean anything. Amy said to try and defend her position. He doesn't have to take erroneous courses or filler credits like the rest of us. His sole focus is going to be the biology master's degree. I saw the details on the professor's desk last week when I brought him one of the test specimens. Cicely said. Arnold's being fast-tracked through everything. What? Amy asked, surprised. Did you even look at his academic record when we went to the school for the prep speeches? Cicely asked. I may have glanced at it. Amy said. Cicely laughed. According to the professor's note, he had a 5.1 average on his courses before he finished taking the final exams a week ago. What? How? Amy asked. Apparently, he does all the work they give him, even the extra credit stuff. Cicely said. Talk about an overachiever. She laughed again. I can only imagine what his average will be if he aced the exams. Amy gave her a concerned look for several moments, then she sighed. All right, maybe, just maybe. I won't take my anger out on him by making him do all the physical labor. Cicely punched her shoulder. I didn't tell you to take it easy on him, stupid. I said not to give him extra shit to do that could be seen as abusing him. As far as I can tell, he likes to work, so you might as well let him. Cicely rubbed her friend's shoulder, then put her arm around her. Just don't make things up and call it necessary, all right? Amy nodded. Great. Cicely said and stood up. Let's go look in through the door and laugh silently as he physically checks everything in the lab. Amy chuckled and stood as well, then they went over to the lab and did just that for about 20 minutes. After that, they realized Arnold really was physically checking every single thing in the lab. He rated it and put it back in the proper spot, and he also checked the things he had already set out for the workstations to be used on Monday during classes. Amy was secretly impressed as Arnold worked without taking a break, like normal people did, especially when they thought no one was around. No one in their right mind worked that hard when they were alone, so she wasn't sure what to make of Arnold. Maybe Cicely is right. Amy thought as Arnold moved around the lab with purpose and wrote down everything. I think he actually likes doing things like this. What she didn't know was that Arnold approached it like he approached eating a meal. Mechanically. His orderly mind had no trouble whatsoever with taking inventory or writing everything down. What's so interesting in the lab? A brisk male voice said from behind them, and both women jumped. Sir. They said at the same time and turned to look at Professor Krenslav. Well? Hamill asked and looked past them. You set my new assistant to take inventory, by hand. Yes, sir. Amy said. I thought it was the best and quickest way to familiarize Arnold with everything we have in the lab. She said. If he only checked boxes on the normal list, I was afraid that he wouldn't understand the importance of having the best equipment. He's also inspecting it for quality. Hamill gave her a stern eye for a moment, then nodded. Yes, actually handling the equipment does make it more real. He said. Although, I didn't really expect him to be put to work quite this soon. He already set up the workstations for Monday, sir. Cicely said. Amy thought it was best to let him do it than just having him watch the others do it. Hamill looked through the door's window again and saw the expert set up at the 6 tables needed for the specimens for the department. Yes, good thinking, Amy. He said. I'm glad you didn't take his comments to heart. Yes, sir. Amy said. He doesn't mean it like you think he does, you see. Hamill said. I recently gained access to his full academic records, and it has several notations about his personality and behavior over the years, including special notes from his previous biology and science teachers. What did they say? He's been dissecting specimens professionally since he was 13. What? Why would they? Amy shook her head. They don't do dissections in middle school, sir. Hamill smiled. Apparently, a high school teacher was being punished and was assigned to his class. She introduced him to it and she had only great things to say about him. The smile disappeared. I thought it was a little too great of an opinion for someone so young, to be honest. It's not normal to be that good so young, which means he's had the disposition for a long time. But, now. You have to help me cultivate his talent, Miss Hollister. Hamill said to Amy. This won't be an easy task. He doesn't have our experience and his knowledge base is a little skewed. However, we can correct this over the next 3 months before he enrolls into the program officially in the fall. Amy wasn't sure what to say to that. I wouldn't ask you to do this if I didn't believe that I needed your help. Hamill said. Now you need to ask yourself a very important question. Amy didn't know if she wanted to know the question, let alone answer it. Can you accept the fact that someone you teach will surpass your own talents? Amy was now sure that she didn't want to answer that question. I don't know. Hamill smiled. It is a blow to the ego, is it not? He asked. Not just to suspect, but to know, that he will be better than us when trained properly. You us? Amy asked, shocked. You said us. Hamill let out a rare chuckle. Yes, Amy. Us. He is destined to match my accomplishments, and perhaps, even exceed them. Sir, that's nonsense. Amy said. He can't surpass what you've done. You're the top person in our field. I am now. What will our new resident genius become when he learns all that we have to teach him? Amy couldn't answer that. If you can accept that, then I want you to help me as much as you can. We can shepherd this young man into the great man he can become. Hamill said and let her think about that for a few moments. When he is done with the inventory, compare it to the one you did last week, and please, don't be insulted when his is different from yours. How do you know it will be different? Amy asked. For the same reason you stated earlier. He is physically inspecting each item and grading them. He will have a deeper knowledge of the quality than a visual inspection can give. Amy let out a sigh. Yes, sir. I'll even compliment him on the good work. Hamill smiled and reached out to put a hand on her arm. Thank you. He said and went back to his office. He just touched your arm. Cicely said, shocked. That's amazing. Amy nodded, because she could still feel the professor's fingers on her skin. More than anything else, that tells me it really is important to the professor that I treat Arnold fairly. She thought. He never touches other people's bare skin. Never. Both Amy and Cicely watched through the lab door and waited for Arnold to finish. When Arnold finished going around the room and checking everything, including the lab tables, the drawers and handles, and the chairs, he walked over to the professor's desk and put the clipboard and pencil down on it. Good job, Arnold. Amy said with a big smile as she opened the lab door, then she and Cicely came in and walked over to the desk. You actually completed that a lot faster than. She stopped talking when she saw the first sheet on the clipboard. Not only did it have the item's location and name, it also had a well-drawn box beside it with the number of items inside. It had the word grade next and 6 boxes beside that, and each and every item had a mark in the box to correspond to the quality. The range was discard, poor, fair, good, very good, and new. He even had a note explaining the grade beside them. For everything. Cicely saw it and gasped. That's better organized than the actual inventory list. She said and then covered her mouth. Sorry, Farina. It's all right. The professor said to compare them. Amy said and took a laptop out of the second drawer and sat down at the professor's desk and opened the laptop, waited for it to start, then loaded the inventory spreadsheet. When she looked at it, it really was a poor imitation of Arnold's simple handwritten itemized list. It took Amy almost 30 minutes to go through Arnold's list and to find the corresponding item in the spreadsheet, because the spreadsheet had automatically alphabetized them. Why does Arnold's list look so much better? Amy asked herself in confusion. It took me hours to set this spreadsheet up with this much detail, and his details are head and shoulders above mine, and he wrote it all out by hand. Amy stopped herself from getting angry about it, mainly because of what the professor had told her about not being upset if Arnold's list was better. The worst part about it was he had caught over 24 pretty glaring faults in some of the equipment that she had missed. It was because she had told him to inspect every item that he had found them, and that made it a little easier for her to accept that he was better than her about it. This is what the professor meant when he asked me if I was prepared for Arnold to surpass my own skills. Amy thought and looked up from the laptop at Arnold, who looked back at her. Not only did he do the inventory a lot faster than I did, he did it by hand and in a lot more detail. Amy knew that he very easily could be rubbing it in her face. In the back of her mind, she expected him to laugh at her pathetic spreadsheet, or to tell her that she couldn't compare to his skills, or even to gloat over his proficiency at doing something she only did a half-assed job with. All Arnold did was stand there and look back at her. "I think it's almost time for lunch," Amy said and looked at her friend. "Cicely, could you give me a hand in adapting a new inventory spreadsheet? I can't fit Arnold's into this one properly, so we have to do another one." "Are you kidding?" Cicely asked. "You know I'm still hungover, right?" Amy smiled. "We just have to start it and set up the parameters. I'll integrate the two lists myself this afternoon." Amy chuckled. "Arnold, come back at 1 o'clock and I'll give you a proper tour of the whole department. There is a lot more to see than just the lobby displays and the lab here." "Okay," Arnold said and walked over to the lab door, opened it, and left. Cicely waited for a minute before she spoke. "You were actually nice to him at the end and not the fake nice you started with." Amy nodded. "Both you and the professor are right." Amy couldn't help it and laughed. "Hey, I can admit it when someone else is right." "Since when?" Cicely asked with a huge grin. "Since now, you drunken whore," Amy said and swatted Cicely's hands from her shoulders. "There she is," Cicely said and laughed. "You had me worried for a second there. Stealing his work already, are you?" Cicely asked and Amy laughed again. "No, I'm adapting it," Amy said. "I'm still going to add my own inventory tweaks to it, since I caught things Arnold missed." "Are you going to tell him that?" Cicely asked. "I'll be going over everything with Arnold as I enter it into the spreadsheet, so yes," Amy said. "You're actually going to work all day until 4, aren't you?" Cicely asked. "I kind of have to, now," Amy said and touched the inventory list. "You know what the professor's going to say when he sees this." Cicely cleared her throat and spoke in a deep voice. "Why isn't this what our spreadsheet looks like?" Amy laughed. "Exactly," she said. "I won't make you hang around until I'm done, either." "Then let's get to work," Cicely said. "There's a plate of spicy curly fries in the cafeteria that's calling my name." Kelly and Annie sat down on one of the beds and let out relieved sighs. They had put everything away that they had brought, which seemed like a lot when it was still in boxes. The things barely filled one of the dressers and only half of the closet, including all the dry cleaning bags with Arnold's new suits and both Arnold's and Kelly's clothes that needed to be hung up. "I can't believe you let her kiss you," Kelly said with a crooked smile. "Let her?" "Ha!" Annie laughed. "She surprised the hell out of me." Kelly snorted and then laughed, too. Annie turned to face her at the sound of her snort and remembered what Diane had said about it meaning that someone was comfortable enough around you to laugh as hard as they wanted. "What was it like?" Kelly asked. "That's a little hard to describe," Annie said. "It was soft. I mean, a lot softer than kissing a man." Kelly nodded. "Did it feel weird? Like you were kissing your sister or something?" Annie raised her eyebrows at the wording. "That sounds like experience talking." Kelly opened her mouth to deny it, then smiled. "Well, there was one time Heather sneaked a glass of wine away from her mother." Annie snorted herself. "You just had to drink and kiss, right?" Kelly blushed a little. "We were both a little depressed that we hadn't had dates in a while and had a few sips." When we started to list the qualities we had that guys should be fighting over us for, well. Soft lips definitely came up. Annie said with a smile. They really are soft. Softer than I thought they would be. Kelly said. You see lipstick and it makes lips look firm and kissable, but, it's like, kissing a cloud. But? Annie prompted. It felt, not empty, but, wrong, somehow. Like, I didn't get a thrill from it. Not even a little. Which means you need to feel something romantic before the kiss can mean anything. Annie said. Yes. That's it. Kelly said and nodded. It wasn't romantic at all. I couldn't even get my head wrapped around the idea to see her like that, you know. Annie nodded. Oh, I know. Kelly smiled. Diane? Annie nodded again. I liked talking to her and spending time with her. To use her own words, she's quite interesting. The hand-holding was a little off-putting, but it wasn't like holding the hand of someone I care about. She said. The kiss, well, it was more surprise than anything. I was surprised when I heard about it, so I can only imagine how you felt. Kelly chuckled. Shocked. Flabbergasted. Flummoxed. Annie said and Kelly laughed. When are you coming back to see her? Kelly asked, teasingly. I'd say on or about the 3rd of Never. Annie said and they both laughed. It was then that they heard someone outside the room door and their laughter died. Did you lock the door? Kelly asked. Always. Annie said. The door handle turned once, and again, then there was a knock on the door. Who is it? Kelly asked. Arnold. Just a second. Kelly ran over to the door and opened it. We're in a strange place, so we have to keep the door locked, just in case. Arnold nodded and stepped inside. We should pick up a nice key ring that you can hook to your belt. Annie said. Then you won't have to worry about losing your keys. Are you off for lunch? Kelly asked. Arnold nodded. Until 1 o'clock, then I have to go back and tour the rest of the biology department. There's a lot more to see than the lobby displays and the lab. She's definitely going to keep you there until 4. Annie said with a chuckle. We better go grab something to eat. Take out? Kelly asked and she nodded. What are you in the mood for? Pizza. Annie said. I haven't had a good pizza in a while. We can get an extra large and save what we don't eat for supper or for lunch tomorrow. Kelly said. Now you're starting to think frugally. Annie said and the 3 of them left the dorm room and went down in the elevator. Kelly checked her cell phone and looked at the local places and read some of the reviews. It looks like there's a good place about 6 blocks east from here. 6 blocks? Annie asked with a laugh. You're going to spend a lot on delivery fees if that's the closest good pizza place. Definitely. Kelly said. If it's a good pizza, it'll be worth getting once a week or so. They left the elevator and went outside and climbed into the car. Annie drove to the address and they went inside to see that it was barely 20 feet wide. How did you fit a pizza place in here? Annie asked the woman behind the counter. We turned it sideways. The woman responded and laughed. What can I get you? Is anything on special? Annie asked. We're running a special on Hawaiian pineapple and spicy Italian sausage. Together? Annie asked with a sour face and the woman laughed. No, each. The woman said and pointed behind her at the menu. Although, for a few dollars, I'll put sausage on the Hawaiian. No thanks. Annie said with a laugh and looked at Kelly. Any preference? I don't think I can eat pineapple and pizza sauce. Kelly said and made the same sour face Annie just used. I also don't think Arnold should eat anything spicy going back to work. Good point. Annie said and looked at the menu. You better give us the extra large meat lover's pizza to go. You got it. The woman said. It'll be about 20 minutes. Thanks. Annie said and picked up a paper takeout menu from the stack on the counter. You're probably going to want this. Kelly nodded and folded it up and put it in her pocket. We should stop at a grocery store and pick up a few things for sandwiches, too. We can do that after we eat and drop Arnold off at work. Annie said and waved at one of the tables. Tell us about what Amy had you doing this morning when we left. The three of them sat down and Arnold told them about setting up the workstations for the rest of the department and then taking a full inventory of the lab equipment. Both Annie and Kelly were surprised for only a few seconds that Amy would do that to him on his very first day, then they realized she was trying to get back at him for what he had said about her to the professor. The problem they had was that they couldn't say anything about it, to either Arnold or his boss. Amy could easily claim that it was necessary and Annie and Kelly would be seen as trying to cause trouble, which was exactly what the professor had warned them about not causing. If they did, then they would no longer be allowed to visit Arnold in the lab, and that was something that neither of them wanted to lose. The pizza arrived and Annie paid for it, then they left and drove back to the apartment. On the way by the desk where the dorm manager sat, Annie asked Doris if she would like a slice of pizza. She politely refused and stated that she had already eaten and couldn't afford to put even more weight on her hips. Both Annie and Kelly nodded in understanding and they went up in the elevator to the dorm room to eat. The pizza was quite delicious and Annie had a piece and a half, Kelly had a piece and a half as well, and Arnold ate one piece and stopped. That left 4 large pieces for another meal and Kelly piled them onto a single plate and put it into the small half-fridge. They all brushed their teeth and used some mouthwash to freshen their mouths. Your mom and I are going to run some errands, so we will see you after work. Kelly said and gave Arnold a kiss. We'll be back in plenty of time, so don't worry about being locked out. Annie said. If we aren't here, Doris should have a key to let you in. Okay. Arnold said and left to go back to the lab. Now that we have a good idea of how much space you have here, we can pick up some more things. Annie said to Kelly. It's a bit sad that your refrigerator is so small. Kelly nodded. We won't be storing a lot of perishable foods, that's true. She said. We've got almost as much cupboard space as you do at the house, though. Annie chuckled. We'll focus on dry goods, then. She said. Oh, and definitely toilet paper and paper towels. I'd say a few packs of paper plates as well. Kelly said. We might as well get used to it, since I doubt either of us is going to have the time to wash dishes when college starts in the fall. Only if you promise to have at least one meal a week on actual plates. Annie said a little sternly. Oh, I can definitely promise that. Kelly said and opened the door as she grinned at Annie. We're coming back to your place every weekend, remember? Annie's mouth opened in surprise and Kelly laughed. We better get going. Kelly said and ushered Annie out of the room, then shut and locked the door. Arnold walked into the lab and saw that it was empty. The laptop and his inventory report was still on the desk. When he looked at the clock on the wall, he saw there was still about 5 minutes left for lunch. He sat down and hit the button to turn the laptop on and waited, then used the knowledge that Kelly had given him and started up the spreadsheet program. He loaded the last file that had been opened and saw a remarkable copy of his inventory setup, with a few exceptions and additions that he assumed Amy must have put in for some reason. Only the first 2 entries had been added, so he checked the fields to make sure the formulas and formats were copied throughout the spreadsheet, then started typing. Arnold had already memorized the keyboard, so all he had to do was read his report and copied over the information into the spreadsheet. He was about halfway through the first page of his report when the lab door opened and Amy came in. Oh, you're here already. Amy said and Arnold looked up at the clock to see that it was 5 minutes after 1 o'clock. What are you doing? She asked and looked at the spreadsheet he was filling out. How long have you been here? 10 minutes. Arnold said and stopped typing for a moment as he flipped the first page of his handwritten inventory, then he started typing again. Amy stood there for the next 20 minutes as Arnold entered everything from his report into the new spreadsheet. "How did you learn to do that?" she asked, and couldn't find any errors. "Not one. My girlfriend Kelly spent all week teaching me everything I needed to know," Arnold said. "All week?" Amy asked, shocked. It had taken her a lot longer than that to learn how to use a spreadsheet properly, and she still couldn't type without looking at the keyboard. "Except for yesterday. We had graduation and prom." Amy was silent for a moment. "I'm sorry you had to work the very next day." "Why?" Arnold asked. "It's the weekend," Amy said. "Most people have the weekends off. My job description said I needed to be available on every second Sunday for work." Amy closed her mouth before she said that wasn't fair, then nodded. "I'll give you a quick tour, then we'll both go over my inventory and yours to compare them and integrate them. I'll show you the things you missed along the way as well." "Okay," Arnold said and saved the spreadsheet and shut the laptop down. Then he followed Amy around the entire department and she showed him a few wonders that he had never seen before. Arnold was in awe as he was led through the rear storage area and shown all of the specimens that were available for display. He had thought his high school biology teacher had a lot of specimens and this collection dwarfed it by a factor of 10. Amy was a little surprised at the sight of him with his mouth slightly open and she watched his eyes as they darted around and tried to look at everything at the same time. "You really like all of this, don't you?" Amy asked in a whisper, because for some reason, she felt like she didn't want to disturb him too much. "It's amazing," Arnold said. "Is that half a cat?" he asked and pointed to a top shelf. "We make those for the veterinary program and even ship some across the country to other schools." "We?" Arnold asked and looked at her with sparkling eyes. Amy was caught slightly off guard by the look, since she hadn't seen much from him besides a stoic expression. "Why yes, as his assistants, we're responsible for the things he's either too busy to do or he doesn't want to do," she said. "We haven't had an order in a few months, so we're waiting for the new semester when the new course starts before we make any more." "How many?" Arnold asked. "The last order was for 30 of them," Amy said. "The whole department was called in for that one." Arnold smiled at the thought of having to prepare so many specimens. "Are there any orders now?" Amy smiled. "No, the only specimens we have to prepare are the ones that have to be done on Monday for the class." "How many students will be there to observe?" Arnold asked. 36. Arnold turned to look at her. "That's why there are 6 separate workstations, so 6 people can stand around them and not interfere with each other." Amy nodded, a little surprised that he had grasped the knowledge so quickly. "I'll be walking around and observing, making corrections in the techniques of the department workers when needed, then I'll do my own specimen." "You will be assisting the professor at the main desk." Arnold nodded and Amy was a little happy that he didn't show any signs of being smug about it. It still bothered her that he didn't think she was good enough to learn from first, though. "Maybe if I show him some of my best work?" Amy asked herself, then she immediately squashed that idea. The last thing she wanted was to have him critique her work, even if he somehow remained objective and didn't berate her over her mistakes. She stood there and let him look over everything that he wanted, then she decided that if he was going to work there and take the master's courses, he needed to know something important. "Arnold? I think it's time I showed you something special," Amy said. Arnold immediately stopped looking at things and walked over to stare intently at her. A collection of hundreds of unprepared specimens. There were all types of animals, from mice all the way up to a horse. An actual, full-size horse, was near the back of the room next to another door and Arnold stared at the horse. "If you can believe it, an equestrian school requested it," Amy said as Arnold walked over to it. "The professor's just waiting on the payment before starting such a huge project." "Will you be working on it, too?" Arnold asked and lightly touched the mane. We both will. Amy said, and she caught her breath when Arnold turned to her with a huge smile. She also tried to ignore how angelic he looked. We need to get back upstairs and go over the inventory. Okay. Arnold said, and they both left the cold storage. Amy locked it and led him back upstairs to the second floor and to the lab, then she sat down at the professor's desk. To her surprise, Arnold moved her chair out slightly and then he sat down between her legs and partially under the desk. Hey Arnold, what? Amy started to ask. I need to see what you're doing. Arnold said and stared at the screen. Amy held in her anger at his presumptuousness, mainly because she was wearing a skirt today and he was sitting between her knees without even asking her first. She shook her head and stopped her sigh, then she started the laptop and brought up the spreadsheet Arnold had filled out. She brought up hers next and copied a few of the things in it to integrate into the new spreadsheet, namely the age of the object, how many times it had been used, and the cost. I see. Arnold said, and Amy did her best to not react to having him so close. I knew when I was making the inventory list that there were things I couldn't record. Like what? Amy asked curiously, because she knew he wouldn't know about the age of the objects. I can only see and count what's there and not what's missing. Arnold said. If anything has been taken, or used somewhere else, or even misplaced in another room, I can't add it to the inventory. He explained. Or if some equipment has been set aside for either the professor's use or yours. You stated earlier that you would construct your own workstation, and I don't know if you are using the leftover parts or new things you have tucked away. That's actually true. Amy said, surprised. Both the professor and I have our own separate equipment that we use, and I usually just add the numbers to the list. They should be inspected, if we're doing a full inventory. Arnold said. All right. Amy said. We'll both look over them when we're done integrating our two inventory lists. Arnold nodded, and it took a little while for them to add Amy's info to the new spreadsheet, because hers was alphabetized and his was organized by location. Once they had it completed and had talked about how they each had knowledge that could contribute to the lab's proficiency, the two of them went into a small side room next to the lab. They inspected the items that Amy and the professor used on a regular basis, and Amy was surprised when Arnold noticed a dull sheen on her dissection tools. They didn't glimmer like they were supposed to, and she inspected them herself. She hadn't noticed that they had dulled to the point of not shining after being cleaned, which meant that they were starting to physically dull and needed to be replaced. Thank you, Arnold. Amy said and put a hand on his. With the new specimens that need to be prepared on Monday, having even slightly dull tools could cause my hand to slip when I unknowingly applied extra pressure to compensate. She said, then realized what she was doing and took her hand back. I would be so angry at myself if I made a mistake. Arnold nodded, understanding. He had been frustrated for a long time while using that old kitchen steak knife. He had been so happy to receive his own tools from his junior high biology teacher, and it made everything so much easier. That thought reminded him of what he was supposed to do after he graduated. It had been 5 years since she had asked him to call her, and he didn't wonder if the number would still work. Amy looked at the time and nodded. It's almost 4 o'clock. I have to get back to the dorm room and set up my character for Fortune's Favor. Arnold said. Fortune's Favor? Amy asked and then smiled. Are you a gamer? I haven't played online yet. Arnold said. Then you're in for a treat, or a good thrashing. Amy said with a grin. Good luck. Arnold nodded and left to head to his dorm room. He had a VR date to prepare for, so he went back to the dorm room and knocked on the door. Arnold. He said before anyone asked who it was. The door opened a moment later and Kelly was there. Hi. Kelly said and gave him a hug and a quick kiss, then brought him inside. Your mom is making a quick and easy meal for supper. You're supposed to be watching me make it. Annie said with a chuckle. It's a good thing that it's almost done, Macaroni and cheese isn't that difficult. Kelly brought Arnold over to the small kitchenette. It's homemade, so you need to be careful that you don't overcook the macaroni before putting it in the oven. Annie pulled a casserole dish out of the small oven and put it on the small table that only had 2 chairs. She uncovered it and steam billowed out and they saw the cheese had just started to bubble. Perfect. Kelly gave her a big smile and handed her 3 real plates to put the food on. She had teased Annie about using paper plates for their first real meal in their new place and Annie had laughed and swatted her with a spatula. Annie put the half-empty casserole dish on top of the stove and covered it. After a short discussion, Arnold sat on the corner of the closest bed and Annie and Kelly sat at the table. The 3 of them ate their fill and they washed up the dishes. Arnold, go ahead and get changed into some casual clothes. Kelly said. We've got some VR work to get to. Okay. Arnold said and walked over to the closet. He took off the suit coat and hung it up, then did the same for the pants. We have a nice key ring for you, too. Annie said and passed it to Kelly, who passed it to him. Arnold attached it to his old house key and then tucked it into the pants pocket and clipped it to a belt loop. It now had 2 keys on it, one for home and one for the dorm room. He took off the shirt and hung it up as well, then he walked over to the dresser and slipped on a pair of jogging pants and a baggy t-shirt. Annie. You're probably going to want to lay down and watch television or something. Kelly said. We're going to be a while playing VR. I was thinking I should head home, actually. Annie said. Oh, no you don't. Kelly said and took her hand and led her to the bed on the right. You said it yourself before that if Arnold didn't come home on the weekend, then you would either pick him up or stay until Sunday night. I meant after he started staying here. Annie said. He has started staying here. Kelly said. Plus, it's his first time staying in a bed so far away from home. Do you really want to not be here for that? Annie opened her mouth to say that they should spend their first night living together, alone, then she sighed. You want me to stay, too? Kelly nodded. I won't admit that I'm scared enough for the both of us. She smiled. It's a big responsibility, and I don't want to mess it up by not having you close by when you could be. Annie chuckled and put an arm around her shoulders. All right, you've convinced me not to run off and give you 2 some privacy. I'll even let you borrow an outfit to wear. Kelly said. You like onesies with the feet attached, right? Annie snorted and then laughed. Only if it's bright pink. Kelly laughed too, then handed her jogging pants and a big baggy t-shirt. Arnold, start up the beast. Arnold nodded and turned on his computer. They had 2 large desks on opposite sides of the double-sized dorm room and Kelly had already set up both Arnold's computer and her own on them. The internet was already set up, so she had just plugged everything in and it was online gaming ready. Start Fortune's Favor and we can get you started on making a character. Kelly said and helped Arnold put on the headset and handed him the controllers. Unlike a lot of the other games Arnold had played, Fortune's Favor actually had a little mini-movie that played around him. Welcome, adventurer. A beautiful blonde woman said and Arnold turned his head to look at her. She wore a gold dress and had a soft glowing light illuminate her from behind, and her feet didn't touch the ground. On this day, you embark on a journey that will send you to many lands. You will meet many people along the way, and depending on how you treat them, will shape the journey to come. Arnold didn't know that was a subtle warning by the game designers to stop players from killing the NPCs. If players assumed that the game characters would affect their game later, most people resisted the urge to remove the annoyances that some of the NPCs would become. I am Helena, goddess of the lands, and I beseech thee to heed the call of those in need. Listen to their pleas and help when you can. This was a not-so-subtle hint to talk to the NPCs to get quests and Arnold was pretty sure he wasn't going to have time for quests or anything. He hit several buttons to try and bring up the menu items and to see his magic, stats, and skill tree information. It wouldn't let him, though. I can't skip this. Arnold said. Not the first time playing. Kelly said. You don't have to stand there and keep listening, though. Arnold smiled and turned away from the woman and walked over to the closest house. The woman floated behind him and shared a lot of the history of the world, its importance to the people, and their belief system. Arnold ignored her and hit the button to kick in the door of the house. He went inside and searched for anything and everything, found a potion of healing, a knife, and a pair of boots. When he looked down, he saw that he was barefoot and equipped the boots right away. The old nag has taken a liking to you. Do you want to keep her? Yes. Arnold said, and the horse glowed for a second. The upkeep is 5 copper coins a day. It will be deducted from your money automatically. Arnold looked at his money and it said 30 copper coins, so he could afford the horse for 6 days if he didn't earn any more money. He looked around and there was nothing else to do in the small area, so he turned around and looked at the glowing woman and waited. Helena finished her tales of woe and misfortune on an upbeat note. And may favor and fortune find you instead. She said and smiled. Is there anything you would like to ask me? Arnold walked over to her. Can I pet you, too? He asked and reached up and pet her hair like he did with the horse. Helena just floated there with slightly wide eyes and didn't respond to the question. Arnold stopped petting her hair and took her hand. Can you come with me on my adventures? He asked, because he knew that having someone that could answer questions was good to have along. Helena opened her mouth to respond with a standard response, then closed her mouth because it wasn't a standard question. She floated there for a minute before she spoke the default phrase. I am Helena, goddess of the lands. Then you can go anywhere, right? Arnold asked. You can come with me, can't you? Yes, I can go anywhere. Helena said, since that was one of her abilities. His second question was still puzzling, since no one had ever asked her that before. Intro to game complete. Loading tutorial. Please wait. You are coming with me. Arnold said and held her hand tightly as the interactive movie faded. I didn't know you could get a horse before you even started the tutorial. Kelly thought in amazement. She caught her breath when Arnold had pet the game guide's head and then grabbed the glowing woman by the hand and the intro ended. You can touch her? She asked herself, then all 3 of them appeared inside the tutorial. What the hell? Arnold still held Helena's hand and the old nag was behind them. He had been trained to gather everything he found in the game, no matter what it was, so it was only natural that he would try to bring everything with him. Welcome to the tutorial. Helena said from beside him, rather than appearing in her usual position behind the players' heads to keep their field of vision clear. In this section, you will choose your name and your class, then your skills and abilities will be tested. She waved her free hand and a pop-up appeared. Please state your name or type it in. Arnold thought back to the display in the lobby and what his mother had called it the instant she saw it. Morbid. He said and typed it in, just in case. Welcome to my lands, Morbid. Helena said warmly. I hope you enjoy your time here. Arnold turned his head and looked at her with a huge smile. I know I will. Let us get started. Helena said and pointed to a stall with a stiff-looking man beside it. You can choose your class from the trainer and then. No. Arnold said. You need to choose a class to grow your character. Helena prompted. Do I have to choose a class right now? Arnold asked. No. Helena said. I must warn you that if you don't choose a class, you will not get any bonuses from having a chosen class. I don't care about that. Arnold said. I need to let your hand go so I can work. Then I will return to. Do not leave. Arnold said. You are coming with me. Arnold, you can't force the guide to stay with you. Kelly said. She's the guide. I can call on her whenever I want, right? Arnold asked and the guide nodded. Yes, you can. Kelly said. Is it against the rules for her to come with me, since she can go anywhere? Arnold asked. No. Helena said. I beseech thee to heed my call, for I am in need. Arnold said to Helena. Listen to my plea and help when you can. Your words move me, Morbid. Helena said. I will stay and help when I can. Thank you. Arnold said and put a hand behind her head and pulled her in close as if to kiss her, then a pop-up appeared. There are no personable actions available during the tutorial. Actions menu is disabled. I can't thank you properly until after the tutorial. Arnold said and let her go. Helena just stood there and didn't say anything. Geez, Arnold. Kelly said with a chuckle. You're actually trying to coerce the game guide. Arnold smiled. You told me to do as much as I could to succeed. He said and walked over to the next stall. Each one had a different person at them and they each revolved around a different skill test. He had practiced a lot and knew he only had a limited amount of time to work, so he only spent 5 minutes at each station to unlock all the skills and to give himself a base stat in everything, including magic. Arnold really wanted to stay and level everything up as much as possible, and he knew he couldn't. He also unlocked all the basic skill trees in the game. He couldn't do much with them at the moment, since his skills were so low, so he concentrated on the skills needed to increase his speed. He had learned that speed was essential to earn faster skill levels in almost everything else. Both Helena and Kelly watched him with awe as he worked and leveled up his speed stat to a level that was ridiculous for a first-time player. Can I come back to the tutorial later? Arnold asked, and his fingers flew over his buttons to keep performing the proper actions when prompted on the screen. I don't have the time to finish it. As long as you don't accept any quests or join a party, I can bring you back here. Helena said. I didn't know you could that. Kelly said. If I wasn't so high level already with great equipment, I would be tempted to start my character over. How's my time? Arnold asked, and a timer popped up on his display. Helena, how long to travel to Haunting Hollow? By foot it's an hour. You have a flying horse, so you can be there in 5 minutes. Helena said. What? Kelly yelled. Arnold nodded. I have an hour left before I have to meet Brad. He said and kept working. The button sequences to keep moving became more complicated as Arnold's speed kept increasing. He didn't slow down at all and kept going. Not surprisingly, after an hour of solid work at the speed skill stall, Arnold had his speed up to 50 and his acrobatics, agility, dexterity, dodge, and endurance were over 30. His strength was up to 20 and his vitality, which was his health, was almost double what he had started with. I have to go. Arnold said and stepped back from the speed stall. Wait. The skinny man at the stall said and held out a pair of medium-quality boots. You have impressed me by working so hard and I believe you deserve these. Arnold took them and they were much better quality than the boots he wore, so he equipped them and gave the old boots to the skinny man, who looked surprised for a moment and then took them. Arnold didn't notice the 10% bonus he had gained to his speed as Helena led him and his horse away from the training area. Kelly saw it, though. If he goes back there and does the same thing to all of his stats and skills, who knows what kinds of special equipment he's going to unlock. Kelly walked over to her computer and turned it on, waited for it to start, then opened one of her old links to the game's message board. She searched for tutorial items and clicked on the most popular message. Top list percentages for items in the tutorial. Kelly read silently and then looked at the list. She found the unnamed Boots of Speed about a third of the way down the list in the speed skill section and saw that it only had a 5% chance to drop. Wow! She thought. Only 2 things are rarer. The Boots of Instantaneous Movement at 3% and the Footwear of the Gods at 1% to drop. Of course, now that she had the list, Kelly saved it to her computer and read through all of the skill drops and shook her head. It was ridiculous what the equipment would do for starting players, especially because they didn't have any requirements. She closed the browser and put her computer into sleep mode, then went back over to watch Arnold. Annie had watched them both silently and hadn't even turned on the television. So, he can surprise her, even though she knows how tenacious he is. She thought with a smile, then the smile faded as she watched Arnold buy a ratty old saddle for a couple of copper coins and put it on the horse. Arnold, you should treat your animals better than. She stopped her thought when the horse neighed happily at him. What the? Why is it happy? What Annie didn't see was the description Arnold has seen about the saddle being soft and worn in because it was so old, and it fit the old nag's slightly deformed back perfectly and didn't cause it pain. Arnold helped Helena climb onto the horse and she sat on its side saddle, then he climbed up and sat behind her and the old nag didn't notice the weight change. She was a magic horse, after all. Arnold held her reins and spoke. Haunted Hollow. The old nag was covered in sparkles and then 2 huge translucent butterfly wings popped out of its shoulders, flapped so fast that they looked like hummingbird wings, and the horse took off. Make sure you land just outside of it. Kelly cautioned him. You know Brad and his friends have an ambush set up for you. Arnold nodded and flew the horse to the right location. Luckily, it wasn't that far and only took 5 minutes because they flew. They had also skipped over half a dozen monster encounters that would have slowed them down considerably if they had been on foot. They landed just outside the lowland area that was between 2 mountain ranges. It had sparse groups of trees and a small river running through it as well. Be careful. Kelly whispered. Arnold climbed off of the old nag, left Helena on the saddle, and led them into the haunted hollow. It was darker here than anywhere else, even though it was a bright and sunny day, and there was something flickering in the distance. Arnold followed the flickering and ignored everything else around him. Kelly had warned him about the ghosts and spirits that would try to trick him into following them to his death, so he only walked forward. It took almost 10 minutes for him to reach the edge of the clearing and saw the piles and piles of item drops. Armor, weapons, crafting materials, crates of food, and even some large animal carcasses were there. The animals had been Brad's idea to make it a tempting target for Arnold, because Heather had told him how much Arnold liked dissecting things. Arnold! Brad said loudly from the other side of the pile and waved. Hey, buddy! Over here! A couple of Brad's friends saw the old nag Arnold had and started to laugh. For some reason, none of them mentioned the beautiful goddess that rode it, almost as if they couldn't see her. Brad glared at his friends and loudly whispered. Quiet. You can laugh at the ratty old horse later. Sorry, Brad. A few of them said in a chorus. I can't believe Eric is gonna miss this epicness. Kevin whispered and gripped the hilt of his sword. I'm going to smash in Arnold's face just like he smashed in mine. Brad put a hand on his shoulder. It's not going to be the same as doing it in real life, but I'm going to stomp his dick into the ground. It's too bad he doesn't have a full dive VR headset like us, then he would feel it. Kevin said. They weren't even bothering to whisper anymore and Arnold looked at Helena. Is that true? Arnold asked in a whisper. If I have a full dive setup, I'll feel this. He ran his hands through the mare's mane. Yes. Both Kelly and Helena said. It won't quite be the same as doing it in real life like they say, though. It is just a game and you can feel the difference. Kelly said as an explanation. When I craft, I'll be able to actually feel it. Arnold whispered as he wiggled his game hand's fingers and Helena nodded. Then let's get this over with. I have to get back to the tutorial. Make sure you don't accept anything they offer. Kelly warned him. You know why. Arnold nodded and handed the reins to Helena, then he started to walk over to the large pile of items. That's it, stupid. Kevin whispered. Come right over to us through the pile. Brad chuckled and then spoke loudly. Go ahead and set your spawn point for the hollow. he said and stopped his laugh before it escaped. That way you can keep coming back here. Don't do it and tell them that you did. Kelly advised him. If they kill you at a spawn point, you'll pop right back up there in 5 minutes and they can kill you again. Okay. Arnold said in a normal voice, and Brad and the guys assumed he was talking about the spawn point. Done. Ha. What an idiot. One of Brad's friends said and was punched. Hey, it was a slip of the tongue. Now you have to come over here so we can transfer ownership of all these great items. Brad said loudly in the hopes that it would cover up what was just said. It's on the ground, so no one owns it right now. Arnold said, and when he was close enough, he received several pop-ups that asked him if he wanted to store the items in front of him. Kelly, does this count as accepting their offer? No, you're right. It's discarded and you can take it all. Kelly said with a smile, and Arnold started storing the hundreds of items as quickly as he could. I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. Brad said. We're going for annihilation. Yeah. They all yelled and ran back about 30 feet, then 2 of them hit their macros and powered up their spells and charged magical items. A second later, the others had magical bows and weapons equipped, and they all opened fire at the same time, right at the spot where Arnold stood. The entire pile of items and a good portion of the clearing was engulfed in several different colored lights as magical explosions lit the entire hollow up. Cracking thunder sounded as lightning burned through the sky and struck the pile 10 times from a high-level spell. The 2 magic users used up 2/3 of their magic reserve to assault with everything they had prepared. It was quite the sight to see. Brad had even used a sword with a lightning discharge multiple times to add to the damage being dealt, then he expended 2 spell scrolls for Firebolt, which was a combo scroll with a fire-charged lightning bolt. Their group had taken down several of the big bosses in the game with the same tactic, and they knew there was no way for Arnold to survive the onslaught. Even the ghosts and spirits in the surrounding trees were wiped out from the magical barrage. Brad and his friends started to celebrate and pat each other on the back. That lasted for only a moment, however. Brad. Look. One of the guys said and pointed. Everyone turned and looked at the spot as the dust and debris faded away and everything was destroyed in the area, except for a glowing Arnold. That wasn't the worst part about him surviving the attack, though. It was the pop-ups afterwards. Warning, new player protocol violation. Players cannot be attacked for the 24 hours after their first login. Players attempting to do so will be fined and warned. First warning fine, 100 gold. Warning, new player protocol violation. Players cannot be attacked for the 24 hours after their first login. Players attempting to do so will be fined and warned. Second warning fine, 500 gold. Warning, new player protocol violation. Players cannot be attacked for the 24 hours after their first login. Players attempting to do so will be fined and warned. Third warning fine, 1,000 gold. Warning, new player protocol violation. Players cannot be attacked for the 24 hours after their first login. Players attempting to do so will be fined and warned. Fourth warning fine, 5,000 gold. Warning, new player protocol violation. Players cannot be attacked for the 24 hours after their first login. Players attempting to do so will be fined and warned. Fifth warning fine, 10,000 gold. Warning, new player protocol violation. Players cannot be attacked for the 24 hours after their first login. Players attempting to do so will be fined and warned. Final warning, player account will be suspended for 1 day. Logout countdown, 30 seconds. Shit. We totally forgot the newbie rule. One of his friends said. Arnold watched them all fade away and walked back over to his horse and Helena. Thank you. I'm sorry that my protection will end tomorrow. Helena said. Arnold nodded. They destroyed all that loot just to get me and I couldn't pick it all up. Fear not, brave adventurer. Helena said and waved her hand, then all of the destroyed loot reappeared in the same spot that it had been in before. It's a safety feature to stop other monsters and players from destroying the loot before it can be gathered. Arnold didn't know the game had that kind of a feature, so he went back over to the spot and spent several minutes gathering everything up, right down to the last dagger, and it practically filled his inventory. He walked back over to the horse and climbed on behind Helena. "Thank you," Arnold said and opened the menu for personal actions, then chose Kiss on Cheek. Helena gasped. "You dare take liberties with a goddess?" she asked sternly and gave him a glare. "It's not much, because it means more when you kiss on the lips," Arnold told her. Helena stopped glaring at him and gave him an inquisitive look instead, as if to ask why he didn't try to take a full liberty when he easily could have. "Take us back to the tutorial area," Arnold said to the nag as he took the reins. The horse was covered in sparkles and it grew the giant butterfly wings from its shoulders again, then they took off and flew for the 5 minutes to head back to where they started. "That pretty much went the way I had hoped it would go." Kelly laughed. "Brad and his friends are such idiots. I can honestly say that I have no idea what just happened," Annie said from the bed. "They were going to pincushion Arnold with both magical and physical attacks every time he appeared in that spot," Kelly explained. "It's a scummy tactic that only the worst players will do." "What's to stop them from doing that again?" Annie asked. "They think that's Arnold's spawn point and they are going to camp there and wait for him to show up," Kelly said with a smile. "Only that's not where he'll appear when he logs back in. There's also no way that they are going to invite him to play again after that spectacular failure. Also, I won't let Arnold accept another invitation anyway." "I'm glad," Annie said. "I don't know what I would have done if they had succeeded. I would call everyone together to take revenge on them, of course," Kelly said, and then she laughed. "I can't wait to see what happens to them when I anonymously post that video." Because of his speed enhancement and bonuses for having his speed at 50, when Arnold tried to do the endurance tutorial so that his character wouldn't have to rest for as long between tasks, it only took him half the time that the speed tutorial had taken to reach level 50, because he had already had it up over 30 when he started. Of course, he tried to do more than that and the stat didn't increase. "I guess I can't max the stat in just the tutorial," Arnold said. "Brave adventurer, training can only take you so far," Helena said from where she still sat on the old nag. "You must strive in the world to make yourself great." Arnold nodded and stepped back from the booth, and the athletic man there handed him a satchel that was filled with enhanced food rations. They would restore his vitality to full and the satchel itself gave a 2% regeneration rate when worn, so he equipped it. Arnold walked over to the next booth, which would train and increase his strength. With both the speed and endurance boosts, Arnold worked for 15 minutes and raised it to level 50, since he had already had a higher than normal strength because of the previous 2 tutorials. The same thing happened with agility, accuracy, dexterity, and dodge, since all of them were used in each trial to some degree. Of course, Arnold didn't stop there. He went to every single booth and did every tutorial available as he raised all of the basic stats to 50. Each time he went to a new booth, it was that much easier, because he did them in a specific order to reduce the amount of time needed to complete each of them by compounding the previously learned skills and enhancements. "I think," Annie started to say and yawned. "That's enough for tonight. Just one more," Arnold said and stepped over to the magic tutorial stall. A very handsome witch stood there and she gave Arnold a squinted-eyed look. She hadn't liked that he had only used her booth the last time for barely 5 minutes and that he had only unlocked the skill and moved on. "What makes you think I'll train you now after you left so abruptly?" the witch asked, because she had watched him go to each and every booth except hers. "I didn't have the time or the ability required to devote to you," Arnold said. "I needed to learn all the other things available so that I would be ready to learn what you have to teach me." "What made you think that?" the witch asked, curious. Magic is the most important subject to learn in this world. Without it, adventurers would be nothing more than commoners. Arnold said, repeating what Kelly had told him. If I do teach you, what are you going to do with that knowledge? The witch asked. Will you hunt down evil wizards or will you destroy whole towns and kill everyone because you can? I can't answer that until I learn what you have to teach me. Arnold said. Oh. You're not going to proclaim your righteousness and promise me to rid the world of the men and women that besmirch the lore of magic? Is that what you want me to do? Arnold asked. Every adventurer has promised me that. The witch said. Has it happened yet? The witch sighed. No. Then what should I do when you teach me what you know? Arnold asked her. Magic is neither good nor bad. It's just magic. People can use it for good and they can use it for evil. You can heal with it and you can kill with it. The witch said. If you learn what I have to teach you, as quickly and as proficiently as you've learned everything else here, then I want you to make me a promise. Arnold nodded. Do something significant with it besides killing. Heal a sick villager. Save 10 damsels in distress. Protect 100 people from attack. Grow 1,000 crops and feed the starving. The witch said. The teaching witch has given you a quest with set conditions. Do you accept? Saying no does not invalidate training and you can still proceed with learning magic. I promise to do as you ask. Arnold said. The witch gave him a big smile and nodded, then she taught Arnold the most efficient way to gather spells, gather energy, and how to properly cast spells as if he was a master caster. Kelly sat there and her mouth was open slightly in surprise, because Arnold was learning a better way to cast magic than her. His mana generation is higher than mine already and he doesn't even have a class yet. She thought in surprise. Arnold kept working until his magic level hit 50 and he had learned how to properly cast a medium-level spell that he wouldn't have access to until his own personal level was level 30, which was something Kelly hadn't seen before either. She had only received the preset generic spells and nothing even remotely close to what Arnold now had in his repertoire. He can't cast most of them yet, but, with how he smashed the tutorial, gaining levels for him is going to be a cinch. Kelly thought. Thank you, adventurer. The training witch said. You have learned all that I have to teach you and have earned this. She said and held out a tome of magic. Oh, my God. Kelly whispered. She gave you a hotkey list. Arnold accepted the tome and it glowed for a moment, then it was filled with all the spells he had learned to cast and a mostly grayed out list popped up on the right side of his display. You just have to say spell number and the number of the spell, or pick it on the list, to prep it. Kelly said. You only have to do the short button combination to cast it, too. Don't forget to keep your promise. The witch said. I won't. Arnold said and walked over to Helena. Where can I set my spawn point? Just outside the training area at the inn or at any town and anywhere in my lands. Helena said. Will you stay there for me or should I call for you when I return? Arnold asked as he led the old nag out of the tutorial area. I should return to my duties. Helena said. Is there another new player starting? Arnold asked. Helena's face lost all expression. You are the first new player in a while. Then you should wait for me to return. Arnold said and walked over to the inn. Wait here for me to get a room. Helena stayed on the horse and watched Arnold go inside. The innkeeper said it would cost 5 copper for a night and 2 copper to keep the old nag in the stable. Arnold paid the fee and received a pop-up. You can set your spawn point for this inn and will appear here whenever you are killed. Do you want to set your spawn point now? Arnold chose yes and went back outside to help Helena climb down from the saddle and a stable hand came out to take the reins of the horse and led her into the small stable at the side of the building. Most players just leave their animals standing wherever they log out. Helena commented. Arnold took her inside the inn and led her up the stairs. He opened the door to the room and it was surprisingly clean, so he walked her over to the bed and sat her down on it. "I'll be back in the morning," Arnold said. "Arnold, give her another kiss on the cheek," Kelly whispered. Arnold chose that option and Helena only glared at him for a moment. "Good night, Helena." "Good night, Morbid." Arnold chose the save progress option and then logged out. Kelly took the controllers from him and he took off the VR headset, then Kelly took the recorded video and sent it to her computer. "I can't believe you convinced the game guide to stay with you," Kelly said, because she didn't want to discuss all the things that he had done so much better than her. Nearly all of his special tutorial starting equipment was nearly as rare as her high-level casting staff that she had worked for months to get. She actually felt a little envious and she knew that wasn't what she wanted to feel about how well Arnold had done. She had trained him well, so she pushed her envy aside and concentrated on how proud she was of him. "You told me to gather everything I could to have the best advantages," Arnold said and took her into his arms. "Thank you," he said and gave her a quick kiss. "Let's get changed for bed," Kelly said, and they both changed right there in front of each other, which was something Kelly hadn't done before, and she was surprised that she didn't feel uncomfortable about it. She gave Arnold a kiss and they both climbed into the left bed and under the blanket. They laid there side by side and didn't cuddle or anything. It was a bit too early in their relationship for that much familiarity in bed, especially since they hadn't had sex yet. "Good night, Arnold," Kelly said. "Good night, Kelly," Arnold said. The two of them had completely forgotten that Arnold's mother was right there and had watched them, even though she had spoken not that long ago. Heather laid in her bed and was surprisingly happy. She wasn't sure why, though. Her life had been quite a mess the last little while and things hadn't worked out like she had hoped they would. Her revenge on Arnold by trying to make him angry about her dating Brad had failed pathetically, even though he had defended her against Brad and had fought him. It didn't make sense to her that Arnold wasn't angry about it. Then again, her mother had warned her that Arnold had quirks that she needed to be careful of, and Heather had to assume that not getting pissed off at an ex-girlfriend for dating his rival was one of them. She rolled onto her side and thought about all the things she and Eric had done all day, and that made her smile. Who would have thought that Eric would be a cool guy? Heather asked herself. "I have to text Kelly and..." Her thought cut off and she sighed. "Maybe she'll be happy that I stopped dating Brad," she thought, and then she sighed again. "She's going to hate me if I tell her that I'm dating Eric." Heather completely ignored the fact that she had set Arnold up to be massacred by the guys in a virtual game. Her reasoning that it was just a game had absolved her from feeling any guilt over it. She didn't realize that actually made her a bit callous of others' feelings, especially Kelly's, since she cared a lot about Arnold and his welfare. Heather's eyes caught the college package on her desk and she smiled again. She had been accepted into the arts degree at the college and both she and her mother had been happy about that. She would be starting in the fall and her classes were spread out and she had enough free time in between that she wouldn't be overwhelmed with the course materials. The best part was that her mother had been against having Eric visiting the house, until she learned that Eric would be going to the local college as well and was taking business administration. He had the marks for it and Claire had reluctantly admitted that he wasn't a complete waste of space. "You see, I told you that she would like you," Heather had said at the time, and both she and her mother had laughed. Heather rolled over onto her back and stared up at the ceiling and sighed. Unlike what a lot of people thought, she actually regretted losing Kelly as her best friend. They had spent the last 6 years hanging out and carrying on, and they had been almost inseparable, until Arnold came along. He had been the deciding factor and things started to change afterwards, then pretty much everything fell apart. Heather couldn't really get angry at Arnold for it, since it was her that pursued him, and it was her that dated Brad and drove Kelly away, and now it was her that was dating the bane of Kelly's reputation. It was her decisions that kept making things worse and had driven a wedge between them. She didn't want to admit to any of that, mainly because Kelly had warned her about it. She closed her eyes and debated calling Kelly to try and explain everything, then she fell asleep before she had made any kind of decision. Claire laid in bed and watched the posted prom video for the 60th time. Kelly is such a lucky girl. She thought and remembered the 3 times she had been with Arnold. A very, very lucky girl. The vice principal laid in bed, exhausted, and hugged Arnold's report to her naked chest. All she could think about was seeing Kelly's euphoric face as Arnold led her out of the boys' bathroom at prom. Amy laid in bed and she thought over everything that had happened that day. Her mind kept going back to how Arnold had completely surpassed her inventory skills, her typing skills, and her personal boundaries. She could almost feel his strong shoulders between her knees, just like when he had sat between her legs, and it still surprised her that he hadn't even glanced at her underwear. I had my legs wide open and I wore a skirt. It was right there. Amy thought. Why didn't he look? Why? She rolled over in bed and sighed, because she just couldn't get those thoughts out of her head. The next morning, Arnold and Kelly woke up almost at the same time. It was early and they had rolled over onto their sides and were currently facing each other. "Good morning," Kelly whispered, in case Annie was still asleep. "Good morning," Arnold whispered back and leaned in to give her a quick kiss. "Good morning, sleepyheads," Annie said from the kitchenette. "I've got toast in the toaster, now that I can make noise." Kelly chuckled and sat up. "You do realize we won't have to get up for another hour normally, right? I shut off the alarm in the hopes that we would all sleep in, and here we are," Annie said with a grin. "All right, we're getting up," Kelly said and smiled back. "Arnold, do you want to shower first?" "Okay," Arnold said and sat up, pushed the blanket off, then stood up. He pulled off his shorts and tossed them into the laundry basket. His t-shirt was next and his underwear soon followed, then he stepped into the bathroom and shut the door. "I'd say you can stop staring, but you can stare all you want," Annie said. "You'll be seeing him a lot like that." "But, he just..." Kelly wasn't sure what to say. "What? Are you worried about me seeing it?" Annie asked and then laughed. "I'm his mother. I've seen him naked since he was a little boy. I know that, intellectually," Kelly said and Annie laughed again. "It's not funny." Annie snorted a laugh and buttered the toast that popped up and added more. "You'll probably have to remind him not to do that if you have company over," she said and waved her over to the small table. "You probably won't have to worry about that for a couple of months, though." Kelly nodded and went over to the table and sat down when Annie gave her the toast. "Thanks. Do you have any plans about what you're going to do all week?" Annie asked. "For the first little while, I'm going to try and stay near Arnold," Kelly said. "I'm not actually worried about him at work that much, except for Amy. She has me concerned, too. She can be a real problem for Arnold if she wants to be," Annie said and made more toast. "Of course, I'm assuming after Arnold's performance yesterday, she may keep herself restrained from now on." "I certainly hope so," Kelly said. "There's not really a lot we can do if she doesn't." Annie nodded. "Not without getting Arnold in trouble, anyway. Which will only get us banned from the lab, since the professor needs Arnold to work," Kelly said. "I can't believe they make 30 dissected cats each year," Annie said and made a gagging sound. Kelly laughed. "Have you seen one? It's actually pretty cool looking. The only cat I've seen like that was roadkill on the side of the highway coming here," Annie said. "Thanks for not pointing it out at the time," Kelly said. "Even I'll get squeamish if it's too gruesome. I can only imagine what the poor animal went through being hit like that," Kelly said. "So scared by all the noises. Then trying to cross with heavy traffic. Okay, we need to stop talking about roadkill or I won't be able to eat." Annie said and made more toast and put it down on a plate in front of the other chair. Arnold came out of the bathroom with a towel wrapped around his waist and sat down to eat. My turn. Kelly said and finished her toast, gave Arnold a quick kiss, then went into the bathroom. Any plans for today? Annie asked her son as she sat down across from him. Playing the game to see what I can do before Brad gets back online. Arnold said. Unless Kelly wants to do something else. No. Kelly said loudly from the bathroom. I'm playing, too. I guess I'm watching television for a while. Annie chuckled and ate her toast and drank her tea. Kelly came out of the bathroom 20 minutes later with a towel wrapped around her and dropped her clothes in the laundry basket, then grabbed underwear and a breezy outfit to wear that consisted of a tube top and short shorts. She usually moved a lot when playing the more complicated games and didn't want to start sweating right after getting a shower. Kelly stepped back into the bathroom to change and came right back out and saw that Arnold had put on shorts. I'm tempted to have you come and pick me up on your horse. She said and put her hands on his bare shoulders and shook him a little. You have a flying horse, she exclaimed and then kissed him. No one knows you can get a horse so easily. No one. Arnold gave her a small smile. Are you going to tell anyone? Hell, no. Kelly laughed. We know something that no other player in the whole world knows. The whole world? Arnold asked and she nodded. Will we meet them? Probably not, since we're logged in to different servers. Kelly said. Which reminds me. She said and woke Arnold's computer up and looked at the server address that his character was using, then she walked over to the other side of the dorm room and woke her own computer and entered the server address into her game loader so that they would both be playing the same instance of the game. How are you going to get to me? Arnold asked. I'll pay the fast travel fee. Kelly said and sat down at her computer to work on that video. She could only include so much, since there was a limit on how big of a file that could be added, so she cut it to right when Arnold met Brad and his group and then ended with Arnold standing there and looking at Brad's shocked face. Ha! Perfect. Kelly said and quickly opened up a secured browser that hid her IP address, then she uploaded the video with the caption, Veteran players noob themselves by luring and attacking new player. Almost immediately someone responded and said that it was Brad's adventuring group and cursed them for such underhanded tactics on a new player, who was still wearing the starting outfit. Another person responded, and another, then someone posted a link to the game forums and shared the video there. Kelly was shocked and it suddenly took on a life of its own as the gaming community banded together and blasted Brad and his group for it. The views on the video skyrocketed as the word about it spread and it was shared everywhere. Kelly had to laugh at it. Annie, are you seeing this? Aha. Annie said and only glanced at it. Stuff like that didn't really make sense to her, since she had avoided it for years on Arnold's behalf. I told you we'd all come together to defend him. Kelly said and bookmarked the video and closed the browser, then she stood up and looked at Arnold. We only have until 8 o'clock tonight to level you up as much as possible. You're actually planning on playing all day? Annie asked, surprised. I thought you were joking. Kelly chuckled. We're taking breaks every hour and eating both lunch and supper. Depending on how well we do today, we might not have to go back online after supper to squeeze out a few more levels. Annie didn't comment on how much of a waste of time that was, considering she usually just sat on the couch and watched television. Have fun with that. She said instead and Kelly laughed. What do we do first? Arnold asked. We're going to sort through all the loot they gave you and see what you can keep, probably just the food, the animal carcasses, and the crafting materials, since they won't have any specific requirements that need to be met to be worn. Kelly said. We can sell the rest for tons of gold and then buy what you need. Arnold nodded and started the game up, put on the VR headset, and picked up the controllers. We should sit down for this. Kelly said and took one of the kitchen chairs and put it behind Arnold. You can sit. She said and guided him into the chair, then she took the other chair and set up her own VR and sat down. I'll be at the inn in a couple of minutes. Okay. Arnold said and waited for the game to load. Welcome back, adventurer. Helena said as Arnold appeared in front of her. Thank you for waiting. Arnold said and chose the kiss on cheek personal action. Helena only glared at him for a second. Why do you keep taking such small liberties with me? Do you want me to take a bigger one? Arnold asked, completely misunderstanding her complaint, and she didn't answer. My girlfriend is coming here to meet us to help me level up. If she is a much higher level than you, she can take you on a more dangerous quest to gain a lot of experience. Helena said. But be warned. Quests increase in difficulty the more people you have. Does the experience increase as well? Arnold asked and she nodded. Will you stay with us to give advice? That will depend on who is meeting us. Helena said. I may not be needed. There was a knock on the room door and Arnold opened it. Hi. Kelly said and chose enthusiastic wave as a personal action and her character waved exaggeratedly. I'm here. She walked into the room and chose kiss on lips next and chose Arnold as the target, then their characters kissed. Welcome, fervent_wish. Helena said and stood. You are of a sufficient level that Morbid does not need my advice while you are adventuring together. What? Kelly looked at Arnold and then at Helena. I thought you were staying with him. My company is not necessary now. Helena said and gave a slight head bow to Arnold. Be well and be safe, adventurer. She said and her glow intensified. Thank you for your help. Arnold said and stepped close and chose hug, and then kiss on lips on the personal actions list and his character gave the game guide a hug and a kiss on the lips. Helena faded away with a look of surprise on her face. Kelly burst out laughing. Okay, that was funny. She asked me why I only kissed her on the cheek and I asked her if she wanted something more. Arnold said. She didn't answer. She probably couldn't. Kelly said. I doubt they programmed her for responses to personal questions. In fact, I bet they never expected her to ever answer personal questions. Or interact personally with players. Or come into the full game out of the tutorial. She laughed again. I can only imagine the error reports she's generating for them after meeting you. Ha. After a few moments, Kelly calmed down and asked Arnold to take out all of the small jewelry items that he had gathered from Brad's loot. They sorted through them all and kept half a dozen rings and necklaces and put them in inventory in a specific spot. He couldn't equip them until he reached a certain level, then he would be able to benefit from them. The rest of the small items were class-specific and he couldn't use them. Are you sure you don't want to choose a class? Kelly asked as Arnold stored the rest and then brought out some of the small armor-related items, like boots, belts, bracers, gloves, shoulder pads, and hip guards. I looked at them and they all have bonuses and drawbacks. Arnold said. Fighters are strong with high vitality and can fight with close combat weapons. They are also terrible at acrobatics and magic. Archers can shoot at long range and do lots of damage. They are also terrible in close combat and have low vitality. Magic users are great at both offensive and defensive spells. They are also terrible at any kind of physical combat. Kelly couldn't refute his observations, since that was the point of the classes. You get major advantages for what you're specializing in and you accept the flaws that all character classes have built into them. You're not going to find a lot of equipment that doesn't require a class. Kelly said and waved at everything on the bed. They were all class-specific and Arnold couldn't use them. After we go adventuring and level up, we can look for the crafting places you told me about. Arnold said. I don't think you'll be able to learn much if you don't take an appropriate class. Kelly cautioned him, then she chuckled. Then again, I didn't know that you could touch the game guide or get a horse before starting the game. So, I'll follow your lead and we'll see what happens. Arnold chose the kiss on lips action and his character kissed her, then they kept sorting his items. It took another 15 minutes to finish sorting everything and Arnold had gifted several magic items to Kelly that she could use immediately. One of the mechanics of the game was that different classes occasionally found items in their loot drops that other classes could use. This promoted interaction between players and sparked both cooperation and camaraderie. It also sparked a lucrative market for rare items that could only be found by high-level players. Kelly thought about refusing the items and Arnold told her that he was going to sell them because he couldn't use them. "All right, I'll take them," she said and equipped them. "If I find anything you can use, I'll give it to you." Arnold nodded and they left the inn. The stable hand came out with the old nag and Arnold pet it. It neighed at him and Kelly shook her head at how easily he had acquired such a valuable travel companion. "We need to head to Langport to sell those items," Kelly said and Arnold helped her up onto the saddle. She sat in the same fashion as Helena did, side saddle, and Arnold climbed on and shook the reins. "Langport," Arnold said and the nag was covered in sparkles, grew the large translucent butterfly wings, then they took off and flew to the large port city. "It's the best place to sell everything you have, rather than trying to sell some in one place and some in another. You can offload all of the items you can't use and get a fair price for them," Kelly said. "Depending on the item, it's actually worth the fast travel fee to go there to sell it." "Like most of my stuff?" Arnold asked and she nodded. "We'll also be close to one of the main quest hubs," Kelly said. "I'm tempted to accept a dungeon dive, just so we can progressively level you up the deeper we go, but we're working on a time budget here. We need lots of experience fast." "What do we do?" Arnold asked as they flew over the countryside. "We take a huge risk," Kelly said. "We should stop at the inn here and set our spawn points, because I'm pretty sure we're going to die the first time we do it." Arnold nodded and the old nag landed right in front of the inn. He paid for the night and for the horse to be put in the stable, the both of them set their spawn points, then they went to the shop where Kelly said he could sell everything for a good price. She had been right and the shop owner was delighted to accept so many new and varied items in a single purchase. He paid very handsomely for everything Arnold had for sale and Arnold received just over 6,000 gold for everything. "Okay, let's shop around and see if we can find some generic armor and weapons for you," Kelly said. They walked around and quickly inquired about what Arnold would need. Almost everything they had required a level, except for things that didn't give any extra stats at all. The sword was dull. The bow and arrows were weak. The armor was only thick cloth and not even leather. "Wow, this is horrible," Kelly said. "I didn't realize how class-dependent everything in the game is," she said. "I was wondering why the tutorial items were so good. It's because there's nothing else like them. Almost everything else requires a class to either buy or use." Arnold bought the items and the good thing was that they were dirt cheap. He equipped the armor and stored the weapons, then made sure he had on everything he had received in the tutorials. "Okay, I guess that's it," Kelly said and took his hand. "It's time for us to go kill ourselves." Arnold raised his eyebrows, which was his version of a shout, and Kelly laughed as she led him down the street. I know. That sounds bad. It's what we have to do to level you up enough to use some of the better equipment and items you have." "I'll level up by dying?" Arnold asked, confused. "You get bonuses for fighting something dangerous, for being an understrength party, and for being stupid enough to try it before you're ready for it." Kelly laughed. "Since you're only level 1 and I'm level 79, we're probably going to be sent to fight a level 60-something creature." Arnold tried to do the calculations in his head for the math needed for that. "It takes into account our stats as well as our levels," Kelly said and he nodded. They walked down several other streets and entered a small one-story building that only had a desk with a woman behind it and a glowing circle in front of it. "Party of 2 and give us the big one," Kelly said. The woman looked at Arnold skeptically, then did something on the desk. "Notice, you have joined a party consisting of Morbid and fervent_wish. Adventure rating of A initiating. Please step into the glowing circle. Don't worry. We know what we're doing," Kelly said. "I've never heard that before," the woman behind the desk said and laughed. "See you in a few minutes," she said and completed the spell. Then Arnold and Kelly disappeared in a flash of light. In the next moment, they appeared in something that looked like an old ruin. "You have entered the lair of the elder giant Tasmanian devil." "Oh, crap," Kelly said, and her character took off to the right. "Run." Arnold ran after her and easily caught up to her, thanks to his high speed and the bonus from the boots. "Damn it, I didn't think we would qualify for this," Kelly said, and they both heard a loud crashing sound behind them. "It's a level 90. My magic is barely going to hurt it. What do we do?" Arnold asked as they approached the wall. "There's a small series of tunnels around here somewhere. I've seen videos of it and of the creature," Kelly said, and ran along the wall with Arnold right beside her. "I hope we can make it to the hiding." A large stone column 30 feet away burst apart and showered them with rock shards and dust as a creature the size of a school bus barreled through it and ran towards them. Its clawed paws dug 10-foot-long furrows into the ground as it scrambled to get to them as fast as it could. Burning red eyes and teeth the size of a shovel chomped angrily, then it lunged at them. "Arnold!" Kelly yelled and pushed Arnold's character out of the way at the last second. Arnold was easily tossed aside by her and he didn't see what happened, but he heard the sounds of something being mulched and stone being crushed. He landed on the ground and looked up to see the creature's muzzle was half buried into the wall. Right through Kelly's body. "Party member, fervent_wish, has died." "Kelly?" Arnold asked as he stood. She didn't respond, because the game blocked all external communications during combat and they could only talk if they were in the game together. The giant creature pulled its muzzle out of the wall and what was left of Kelly's lifeless torso fell to the ground with a splat. The creature shook its head from being stunned, saw the morsel in front of it, and scooped it up into its paws and started to chew on it. Arnold felt that protective feeling he had felt before as his eyes watched his girlfriend being unceremoniously eaten in front of him. He knew it was pointless to attack with him only level 1 and the creature level 90, but he calmly walked over to the creature and took out his dull sword. He climbed up onto some of the debris the creature had broken from the wall, jumped up onto the bloody muzzle, and plunged his sword right into its eye. The creature screeched from pain and didn't really suffer any damage. It was just blinded by something being stuck in its eye. It shook its head to try and dislodge the thing and Arnold was flung off and hit the ground and rolled for almost 20 feet. When he came to a stop, he had lost nearly all of his vitality. When Arnold stood up, the creature had given up trying to unblock its eye and started to eat Kelly's mulched legs. Arnold took out his bow and arrows and cast the level 1 spell boost on it. It gave him an extra 25% to hit, on top of his bonuses for having a high accuracy. He was still only level 1, though. When he shot an arrow into the creature's other eye, not only didn't it do any damage, it actually bounced off. Arnold thought about hiding inside the hole that the creature had made in the wall, then realized there wouldn't be much point. He stored the bow and arrows and took out a short sword in one hand and a dagger in the other. Dual-wielding weapons is a rogue class skill, level 10, and is not available. The dagger disappeared and Arnold shrugged as he walked over to the creature. He knew where the most vulnerable places were on animals, since he had studied so much about them, and he climbed onto the creature's back and used the short sword to poke and prod the thing all over. It didn't notice what Arnold was doing and finished its meal, then it licked up as much of the blood as it could. It turned around to look for the other bit of food it had seen and all the hairs on its back stood up. It knew it was in danger of some kind and whirled around to look behind itself. Nothing was there and it still felt threatened. It took one cautious step and felt a sharp and burning pain near its rear leg, right at the side of its crotch. The creature let out another screech from the pain it had never felt before, and it tried to run and jump away. Its vitality dropped to half as the short sword dug into its innards. Arnold had tied the sword to its own leg and let the creature hurt itself when it moved. With a large grievous wound torn on its underside, the creature collapsed and started to bleed out. "It looks like I have my first specimen," Arnold said and took out the dagger. Arnold spent the next 20 minutes gutting the creature and ignored its mewling sounds. It died at some point during that time as he was harvesting the crafting organs. Arnold saw that it wasn't entirely accurate and it didn't contain everything that should have been inside the creature. He retrieved both his short sword tied to its leg and his sword that was still stuck in its eye. With his experience skinning the rabbit in the crafting simulator that Kelly had him train on, the last thing Arnold did was take the pelt. Since the creature was so large, there was almost no way for Arnold to mess it up. He stored the organs in the pelt, then he stepped back and waited. After a few moments, the carcass shimmered and faded away, then left a huge pile of items behind. Arnold stored everything and walked over to the wall where Kelly had died. A few items were there in a pile and he retrieved them, then he walked back over to the circle they had originally appeared in. After a brief flash of light, he reappeared in the small building in Langport. "Arnold!" Kelly exclaimed and her character took him into a hug and then kissed him. "I'm so sorry. I can hear you now," Arnold said. "I know. I wasn't sure why they blocked external sound until I checked the forums. In one of the latest patches, they wanted to make combat more realistic and stopped people from hearing each other in real life if someone dies." Kelly shook her head. "It was something stupid about not giving advice or telling others where the creatures are located, because they can watch the battle until the end without being there." "I have your things," Arnold said and took out the items she dropped. "Thanks," Kelly said and accepted them, then she went quiet for a few moments. "Arnold, I'm sorry that." She sighed. "That scene was. I'm sorry you saw me being." Arnold chose pet hair and his character reached up and pet her hair, then chose pet cheek and he stroked her cheek. "Step forward, please," the woman behind the desk said. "I thought you would have been the first back, not the last," she said to Arnold and did something on her desk. "I tried to berate her for sending us after that ridiculous creature and she didn't react and said it was our bad luck." Kelly whispered, then she gasped at the pop-up she received. "You have successfully completed the Class A Adventure Elder Giant Tasmanian Devil. You have gained 83,775 experience and 1,000 gold. Because of your heroic sacrifice in saving your fellow party member, who subsequently defeated the monster, you have been awarded a bonus of 50,000 experience." "Arnold. I got a ton of experience and 1,000 gold," Kelly said. "What did you get?" Arnold chose the Share Info option and Kelly gasped again. "You have successfully completed the Class A Adventure Elder Giant Tasmanian Devil. You have gained 675,900 experience and 10,000 gold. Because of your ingenuity in using the creature's own strength to defeat it, when you had no ability to defeat it yourself, you have been awarded a bonus of 150,000 experience." "Oh, Arnold," Kelly said softly. "I gained 2 levels and I'm 81 now." "How many levels did you gain?" 46. Arnold said. "Oh. My. God." Kelly yelled and hugged him. "Arnold. That's amazing. Are we going to keep going?" Arnold asked. "Do you want to?" Kelly asked. "That last thing, seeing me be. Let's only take the medium level instead of the top, since their calculations seem to be off," Arnold said. "Oh, I'm going to message the developers and I'm going to give them a piece of my mind. Kelly said. Putting us up against a creature like that for the first time was ridiculous. Arnold stepped back into the circle and Kelly went with him. Equip your equipment that only had level requirements. Kelly reminded him. Arnold's character changed when his thick cloth armor was replaced with a chest plate, knee guards, bracers on his arms, and 2 shoulder pads. He also equipped a necklace to give him bonuses to his speed and 2 rings to give him boosts to his strength and vitality. Kelly smiled at him. Better. She said and looked at the woman. Party of 2. Medium level this time. See you in a few minutes. The woman said with a smile, and Arnold and Kelly disappeared in a flash of light. Arnold and Kelly fought 2 more large creatures and fended them off for a few minutes while Arnold tried to find their weaknesses. Once he had, they attacked with purpose and both large creatures were disposed of after 15 minutes, gutted and skinned, then looted. Arnold gained 5 more levels and Kelly just barely gained another level herself. That's an hour. Kelly said. Let's take a break. Okay. Arnold said, and they left the building and went back to the inn and went into their room, then logged out. Arnold put his controllers down and took off his headset, set them on his desk, and he was taken into a hug from behind. He slowly turned around and looked into his mother's eyes that were at the same height as his. Seeing a virtual Kelly being eaten was a horrible, horrible thing. Annie said. Are you okay? She asked, her voice full of concern. Arnold nodded and hugged her back. It really was horrible, especially when we couldn't talk to you to tell you that I was okay. Kelly said and let out a sigh. We couldn't touch you either. You were moving around and we didn't want to distract you or get in your way. Arnold let his mother go and walked over to Kelly and took her into a hug. She was a little shorter than him and she tilted her head up slightly. He took the cue and kissed her. Brad and his friends sat around the living room and watched the football game. It was only a pickup game and didn't have any real importance except for stats for the players, so none of them were very invested in the outcome, even though their favorite team played. To Brad's surprise, his cell phone on the coffee table beeped at him. It was odd, because all of his friends were there, except for Eric. No one would be texting him anyway, so when it beeped again and again, he reached for it. In the next moment, all of the phones his friends had beeped at them, too. What the hell? Brad picked it up and he saw an angry text. It was shocking, to say the least, since most people at school weren't stupid enough to piss him off. He had forgotten that he was no longer in school or had easy access to the people he had bullied over the years. Oh, man. One of his friends exclaimed. It's out. What is? Kevin asked and checked his own phone. What we did. The friend responded. There's a video of us ambushing Arnold. You don't know it was him. The video was posted anonymously. The friend said and then laughed at his joke, as did the others. They all knew that the point of view was from over virtual Arnold's shoulder, which meant only he could have shared it. Our phones are blowing up. Someone else said as the beeping continued and turned off notifications. How did they get our phone numbers, anyway? Once they saw us in the video, it would be easy to find someone with at least one of our numbers. Kevin said. When you have one. We gotta do something about this. One of the others said. We're being dragged through the mud online. Do what? Apologize? Brad asked with a laugh. Or maybe give him another invite and give him even more stuff. We blew most of that junk up. Ha! Kevin grinned. I bet he was as disappointed with that as we were for not being able to kill him. Brad said with satisfaction, then his phone beeped and he gave it a pointed stare and turned it off. What are we going to do? Kevin asked, because he knew that look. Does anyone know where Arnold lives? Brad asked with a grin. Eric sat behind the wheel of his car on a large hill that overlooked the whole town they lived in, when his phone beeped at him and he sighed. I wasn't there. He typed in response. It beeped again. Look at the video. Not me. He responded. Just turn it off. Heather said and leaned against his shoulder. They are going to believe what they want to believe no matter what you say. Eric nodded and turned it off. You're right. It's not worth my time to respond to it. I'm a little surprised that Kelly wasn't there with Arnold in the video. Heather said. Kelly. Eric let out a sigh that was full of regret. It's fitting, isn't it? Heather asked. You liked Kelly and I liked Arnold. Now they are together and so are we. Eric turned his head to look at her. Is that why you're so relaxed today? Heather thought about it, then smiled. Actually, yes. I think that's it. We're both jealous of the people with the ones we love and we are as close as we are going to get to them by being together. There's no chance to get them for ourselves, is there? Eric asked. None at all. Heather said, a little sadly. We both destroyed any chance of winning them back. Eric thought about that. Since when has a consolation prize been better than the actual prize? He asked with a smile. Heather was offended for only a second about being called a consolation prize, then she realized what he meant. She smiled back sexily and leaned in to give him a kiss and to start the makeout session they had gone there to do. Her phone beeped at her and she broke the kiss to check it. Is it your mom? Eric asked. No, it's Brad. Heather said. He wants Arnold's address. Eric took a deep breath and let it out. Well, you have two choices now. You can ignore him and hope that he doesn't come looking for you to get the address, or you can tell him and hope that he doesn't do anything stupid like actually going there to call Arnold out. Heather chuckled. Arnold's not even there. She said and gave Brad the address. He's working at the college all summer. Eric chucked, too. Okay, that's smart. He said and gave her a kiss. Are you going to warn Arnold? What for? Heather asked. He's gone for however long a master's degree takes to get. Eric turned his body slightly and took her into his arms. What if Brad asks you where he really is? I can tell him that I don't know, since I don't. Heather said and put her phone down and hugged Eric back. I dumped Arnold before I found out any of the details. You know, you're even sexier when you outsmart people. Eric said in a whisper. I must be dripping with sexiness, then. Heather whispered back and he chuckled. They looked into each other's eyes for several moments as the mood shifted from joking around to being more serious, then they kissed and their makeout session began again in earnest. I'll get the toilet paper. I'll get the eggs. I'll grab the compost. Brad and Kevin sat on the couch and looked at each other. Baseball bats? Kevin asked. No, we can't go that far, even though he deserves it. Brad said. We'll just have to settle for pounding him. With our fists. That's fine with me. Kevin said and rubbed his hands together. I'll hold him and you can go first. Thanks, buddy. Brad said and they stood up when the others came in with several plastic bags full of stuff. This is going to be fun. One of the guys said. We haven't razzied a house in forever. They all laughed and left Brad's house, piled into Brad's car, and headed over to Arnold's place. Arnold and Kelly played for several hours and gathered a bunch more specimens of both rare and unequal quality, then they stopped for lunch and logged off. They sat at the kitchenette table and ate the last of the reheated pizza with Annie, who sat on the closest bed and ate. I think we have you at a good level now. Kelly said to Arnold and took a bite of pizza. Hours earlier than I had expected. She let out a short laugh. Your way of fighting things we shouldn't be fighting is so radical that we're wrecking the summoning system. That's music to my ears. Annie said. I think we need to explore the local area and see what you two will have for both food and entertainment. She looked at them. Within walking distance, too. A short walking distance. Kelly corrected. There's no way I want to walk anywhere around an unfamiliar place all alone, day or night. That's a good point. Annie said. Make sure when you do leave, tell Doris where you're going and how long you're going to be. Annie, that's a fantastic idea. Kelly said. She'll be like a guardian angel that watches out for me. You should give her your cell phone numbers, too. Annie suggested, and both Arnold and Kelly nodded. I'm sure she won't be too bothered by having to keep track of you. That's her job. Arnold said, and Annie and Kelly looked at him. She tracks who comes in and leaves the dorm building and stops people who are not supposed to be here. Hey, you're right. Kelly said. We're just helping her do her job. Annie chuckled. I bet she'll laugh if you tell her that. Probably. Kelly stood up. If we're going out, we should change into something more appropriate. What? You don't want your ass hanging out or your boobs bouncing around braless? Annie asked. Kelly laughed and shook her head. I promised myself that I would only dress like this around Arnold and no one else. She said, and walked around the table and leaned down to give him a kiss on the lips. I should get changed, too. Annie said. Jogging pants are comfortable and are also a bad fashion statement. Kelly pointed to her part of the closet. Help yourself. She said, and walked over to her dresser and grabbed a pair of jeans and a thin sweater from one drawer and a bra from the top drawer. Mom made me bring a few things I'm never going to wear. Annie had to laugh at that and looked in the closet. Ah, yes. I see. She said, and took out a dry cleaning bag with a red sequin dress inside that was similar to the dress Catherine had worn when she first met Arnold. Yeah, that's never leaving the bag. Kelly laughed and pulled off her tube top and tossed it onto her bed, then slipped on the bra. That's so not me. Annie hung the bag back in the closet and rummaged through them. Oh, classy. Which one? Kelly turned around and looked, then nodded. The beige pantsuit. Good choice. You don't mind? Annie asked and opened it up. People living together need to get used to sharing some clothes. Kelly joked as she slipped on her jeans, and Annie nodded and started to change. Arnold walked over to his part of the closet and grabbed the first dry cleaning bag and took out a pair of dark blue dress pants and a blue short-sleeved shirt. The three of them finished changing and then turned to inspect each other. Oh, your collar is a little crooked. Kelly said, and adjusted Arnold's shirt, then she unbuttoned the top button to give him some breathing room. Annie, how are you doing? Does the suit fit? The pants are a little tight, but manageable. Annie said, and turned around to show her ass, and Kelly saw that the pants were quite snug. I had to let them hang a little lower on my hips. I knew Mom bought them for leg length and not for the waist. She always makes that mistake with me. Kelly said with a chuckle. Don't worry, we'll walk slow and they won't ride up too much. Annie snorted and then laughed. Thanks for your consideration of my future wedgie. Kelly laughed. What are friends for? She asked and took Arnold's hand. You look very handsome. Arnold gave her a kiss, and the three of them left the dorm room to spend the afternoon exploring the campus and surrounding area. They went down in the elevator and approached Doris. She was in a fit of laughter after Arnold told her that they were helping her do her job by giving her their cell phone numbers and asked her to keep track of them. Oh. You're so precious. Doris exclaimed when she stopped laughing and walked around her desk. Her chest jiggled in her thin blouse and she looked up at the 5-inch taller boy. You deserve a hug for making me laugh. She said, and didn't wait for him to respond as she pulled him down and shoved his head into her chest. She squeezed him tightly and then laughed again when he didn't resist or try to pull away, unlike nearly every other person she had ever hugged. Can I have him back? We're going on a self-tour of the campus. Kelly said. Doris laughed again and let Arnold go. I'm sorry. People usually fight me off by now and it was nice that he didn't. That made Kelly and Annie laugh and Doris looked at Arnold's face. Anytime you want another hug like that, you come and see me. Doris said with a huge smile. Okay. Arnold said and Kelly led him and Annie out of the dorm building. I should warn you that she might have designs on you, but she looked like she genuinely liked that you didn't try to get away. Annie said. Who fights off a hug, anyway? Kelly laughed again. You definitely haven't dated in a while. I had to fight them off all the time. You're super cute and cuddly, so that's understandable. Annie joked and Kelly rolled her eyes. Let's start at the cafeteria and work our way out to the edges. We should have brought the map they gave Arnold in the assistance package. Kelly said. We'd be spending too much time looking at the map and not where we're going. Annie said. Trust me. You'll remember this layout a lot better if you find things for yourself. The three of them walked around and noted the different things they had access to on the campus, which included an Olympic-size pool in its own separate building, 2 tennis courts, a basketball court, a large football and soccer field, and there was even a physical education building that had every kind of workout equipment that you could imagine. Everything they found was available for students to use in the evenings and on the weekends, barring any special events that might be using the facilities at the time. It's like its own little world. Kelly said as they walked around the perimeter of the campus after their tour. The only thing it's missing is fast food restaurants. Annie nodded and pointed. Let's go that way and see what we can find in that regard. They walked around for a while and found several good restaurants and grabbed their takeout menus, then stopped at a nice Chinese food place and sat down to eat. The food was quite good and Kelly marked the menu as a higher priority for takeout orders. Then the three of them walked back towards the campus. They made it back to the dorm as it was getting dark and went inside, and Annie changed out of the pantsuit and put on her clothes from the day before. I better go. Annie said. It's getting late and it's a long drive. Arnold took her into a hug and gave her a quick kiss. I love you, Mom. I love you, too. Annie said and he let her go. We'll see you in 5 days. Kelly said and gave her a hug, too. The buses run early, so we'll be at your house at about 9 o'clock Saturday morning. I'll be waiting. Annie said and gave her another hug, then whispered in Kelly's ear. Good luck. Thanks. Kelly said and Annie let her go. Annie gave the both of them another hug, touched Arnold's face for a brief moment, then she left. She held in her tears until she climbed into the car and then she sat there and let them flow. It took her almost 10 minutes to calm down and to compose herself. She wiped at her face and took a deep breath, looked at the building that she was leaving her son behind in, and drove out of the parking lot to go back to her large and empty house. Annie drove all the way back home without stopping. When she reached her street, she had to slow down because of the traffic. She thought that was odd, since her street was a quiet one normally and nothing really happened. People turned and looked at her and she saw that it was her neighbors. They looked really sad for some reason and she immediately wondered what had happened. Annie managed to get around the parked cars and almost reached her house and saw 4 police cars. What's going on? She asked as she pulled up to the house and had to park behind a police car. She couldn't even get into the driveway because 2 other police cars were there. She stepped out of her car and looked around to see what was happening and didn't notice anything at first, then she saw it. No. She yelled. Ma'am. You can't park here. A police officer said. This is my house. Annie yelled and waved at it. Both the yard and the house were almost completely obscured by toilet paper, dozens of egg splatters, and dark blotches of something that she really didn't want to know what it was, because it looked like shit, and she didn't want to face that if it was. We called it in, Annie. Beth, the woman from next door said. I'm just sorry I didn't see the bastards before it got to this point. What? Wait, you caught them? Annie asked and turned to the police officer. Please tell me you caught them. The man gave her a huge smile and pointed to the 2 police cars parked in her driveway and then at his own parked in front of her car. 6 assailants caught brown-handed. Annie groaned. Damn it. It really is shit, isn't it? Among other things. The police officer said. As far as we can tell without actually examining the contents, it's compost. Ugh. I think that's worse. It's rotting. Annie said and sighed. I just cleaned the place, too. I'd suggest calling the insurance company right away and making a claim, since there are a few broken windows and... The police officer tried to explain and Annie cut him off. What? No. No. It's inside my house. That shit is inside my house. At least downstairs. The officer said. I'm sorry. Who was it? Annie asked, because she had no idea who would want to do this to her. The leader of their little group is a guy named Brad Peckerwood. The officer said and several laughs came from the middle car. Quiet. A police officer by the car said and Brad settled down and glared at him. His real name is Brad Willoughby. Annie said. You know him? The police officer asked. No, but, I know of him. Annie said. Arnold dated a girl a while back and she was a real piece of work. When she broke up with him over something stupid, she dated Brad to get back at him and tried to make him jealous. Did it work? The officer asked. No. Arnold started dating a great girl and he doesn't even think about Heather anymore. That's curious. Why would he come here to do this? The officer asked. I have no idea. Annie said. I didn't even know he knew where I lived. The police officer made the connection right away. Obviously, she gave him the address. The man chuckled. Ma'am, I've heard worse from my 10-year-old. What are you letting your kid watch that he learn things worse than that? Annie asked, a little incredulous, and he laughed. You can drop the ma'am, by the way. I'm Annie. Annie Strickland. She said and held a hand out to him. I'm Officer Holman while on duty. He smiled and shook her hand. Charlie when I'm not. Nice to meet you, Officer Holman. Annie said. Now, what do I do about all of this crap? I'll escort you inside to get some things, then I suggest staying in a hotel for a few days. I can't leave the broken windows and... I've already got a call into a buddy of mine. He's coming over with some plywood and he'll board them up for you. Annie let out a sigh. All right. Thank you. This isn't my first rodeo. Officer Holman said. I assume you want the perpetrators charged. Damn right. I want you to throw the book at them. Annie exclaimed. Officer Holman chuckled. They only say things like that on television. Well, you charge them with everything you can and keep them in jail. I can sleep tonight and won't have to worry about them coming back here to finish the job later. That won't be a problem. Officer Holman said. Thanks to Mrs. Smith, we've got them dead to rights for everything from trespassing on private property to destruction of said property. I'll have to wait to hear from the insurance company before I can add charges for excessive damages and cleanup. I'm really glad I just paid a year's premiums on the house insurance. Annie said. Officer Holman chuckled. Then you won't have to worry about your rates going up until next year, especially if this turns out to be a costly one. He waved at the house. I can take you in now if you want. Annie nodded and looked at Beth. Thank you so much for watching the place for me. What are neighbors for besides spying on their neighbors? Beth joked and Annie gave her a hug. Hey, Chuck. I'm taking the homeowner inside. Officer Holman said. Great. We've got permission to go in. Chuck said. Okay, guys. Photograph everything. If it's as messed up inside as I think it is, watch where you step. The main downstairs window is busted, so yeah. It's going to be messy in there. One of the other officers said. Tell me you have face masks. I never leave home without them. Chuck said and pulled a handful of them from his pocket. All right, let's go. Officer Holman said and took 2 of the masks and gave one to Annie. They put them on and walked over to the front door. Annie opened it with her key and led a group of officers inside the crime scene. Ugh. Annie gagged as the smell hit her. This mask sucks. Officer Holman laughed. You would be tasting that smell if you didn't have it on. Annie almost threw up and covered her mouth. Sorry. Officer Holman said and put a hand on her shoulder. Where to first? Upstairs bedroom. Annie whispered. I need clothes for a few days. Annie led him up the stairs and to her bedroom, then she grabbed a large suitcase from the closet and emptied most of her drawers into it and then grabbed a pile of things from the closet that she really liked. The smell wasn't as bad up here, so she made sure to close everything again and Officer Holman took the suitcase for her. Kitchen. Annie said and led him out of the bedroom and down the stairs. I wouldn't take any food, not even dry goods. Officer Holman cautioned her. We don't know how much the toxins have spread around. When they passed the living room, the couch was covered in compost and eggs. I loved that couch. Annie said sadly. She and Arnold had spent a lot of time on it and its loss was probably going to hit her pretty hard later. They went by the dining room and it only had one good solid hit with compost, which was enough to ruin the table for all future meals. God damn it. Annie said and went into the kitchen. She had been glad that she had already given Arnold the last of his college fund money, which was about $1,800, and she retrieved the $1,000 bursary money from the can on top of the refrigerator. Officer Holman didn't comment about how insecure that was and led her back out of the house and to her car. Call your insurance company. Officer Holman said when he put Annie's bag in her trunk. If you're lucky, they can send someone out first thing in the morning to look at the place. Annie sighed. We need to go back in. I forgot my phone number list by the phone. Officer Holman gave her an inquisitive look for a moment, then brought her back into the kitchen and Annie retrieved her list. She picked up the phone, dialed the number and waited, then left a message on the answering service about the state of the house and about making a claim. She hung up and followed the officer back out of the house and to her car. Thank you. Annie said to him. Call them again and leave the number for the hotel. Officer Holman said. They are probably going to want you here to walk through the place. I'll warn them about the smell, too. Annie said and he laughed. Good luck, ma'am. He said. I mean Annie. He corrected and held a business card out to her. Call me if anything else happens, all right? Annie nodded and climbed into the driver's seat of her car and carefully pulled her car away from both the cop car and the curb, then she slowly made her way down the other end of the street and left her house behind. The irony of the situation was not lost on her. First she had to leave her only son and return to a large empty house, and now she couldn't return to it because of vandalism. She sighed and drove to the closest motel that she knew about and parked in the parking lot. It was pretty late, so she went to the office and the front desk and asked for a room for a few days. The guy there told her the price per night, that she almost told him to go screw himself over, then she sighed and paid for the night. She needed the contact number for the insurance company. Annie took the key and drove her car over to park in front of the room on the bottom floor near the end of the building. She took her suitcase from the trunk and locked the car, and her spirits waned as she went into the room and saw that it was a ratty old bed with old sheets and a blanket on it. She checked it and to her surprise, there were no bed bugs in it. She wasn't getting under the blanket, though. That was a bit too much risk for her to take. She went into the bathroom and looked at the fairly new shower curtain and smiled. She easily unhooked it from the rod and took it out to the bed and covered it, to give her at least some protection from anything that might be there that she couldn't see, and she sat down on the bed to the sound of the crinkling plastic. Annie took several deep breaths to stop herself from crying. She needed to be strong, and she hoped beyond hope, that the insurance company would answer and would be at her house in the morning. They needed to clean the place up by the end of the week, or Arnold and Kelly would have nowhere to stay for the weekend. "Oh, Arnold," Annie said and closed her eyes. What a mess this is," she said. "I can't even imagine what you would have done if you were here." She opened her eyes and looked at the number on the telephone. She called the insurance company and left another message with her name, her new contact number, and that she would meet them as soon as they needed her to. Annie hung up the phone and debated calling Arnold about it. She knew that if she did, she couldn't predict what he would do about it. No one had ever threatened their home before and Annie had no way to predict what Arnold would think about it. She looked at the alarm clock on the bedside table and saw how late it was, so she decided to wait until the morning to tell him and Kelly. She didn't want to ruin their first night alone together. She laid back onto the shower curtain and didn't even think about taking a shower or changing her clothes for bed. This was not a time for her to be either comfortable or to enjoy the experience. She was in a crisis and she needed to stay alert and aware of her surroundings. Needless to say, after the long day she had, she fell asleep almost immediately and slept all night. Arnold and Kelly had slept in the same bed again, just like they had the night before when Annie had been there. Kelly had started out in the other bed, then for some reason felt that it was wrong, somehow. She migrated to Arnold's bed and they had slept side by side all night. Neither of them had tried to do anything to each other and only slept. For Kelly, it was a solid confirmation that Arnold wasn't going to try and push her or goad her into sex. For Arnold, it was just another night of sleep and having Kelly there didn't bother him at all, just like it hadn't the night before. Just like the previous day, they both woke up early and it was Kelly's turn to make breakfast for them. She went the easy route and made waffles and syrup. It was their first day alone together as well, so she was a little nervous about trying to make a proper breakfast, even though she knew that Arnold didn't really care about such things. He ate whatever she put in front of him and that was that. They had just sat down to eat when Arnold's phone beeped at him and he picked it up. "Hello?" Arnold said and was silent for quite some time. "Okay," he said and handed the phone to Kelly. "It's my mom." Kelly took the phone. "Annie?" she asked, then she listened for just as long. "Oh, my God," she said. "Those, insufferable, pig-headed, skeevy, bastards," she said. "Annie, I'm so sorry." She paused for a few moments. "No, I'm pretty sure it was my fault. I posted that video," she said. "The cops didn't say anything about it?" "Really?" Kelly sighed and listened for another minute or so. "Okay. Arnold won't come until the weekend," Kelly said. "I know you don't need someone else there to take care of when you're trying to take care of yourself, but I'll be on the bus and we'll be there in a few hours," she said. "No, you're not going to convince me otherwise. I need to be there, especially if my parents get wind of this." Kelly sat there and listened for a few minutes. "Yes, I know. This is going to mess up our plans a little," Kelly said. "I'm going to kill Brad and his friends for this. They are taking me away from Arnold." She paused for a moment. "You're lucky the bus doesn't run for another hour or I would already be on it." "Yes, really." She listened for another minute. "I have a better idea. We're going to stay with my parents." The phone went silent and Kelly sat there and waited for a response. It took a few minutes. "It's the most logical choice. It's got to be there or this whole thing will be blown out of the water," Kelly said. "Yes, I know Arnold will be left alone. We don't have a choice." She paused. I don't have a choice, so it's either that or we tell the truth and ruin everything we planned. It took Kelly another few minutes to convince Annie that she needed to be there, and then she hung up the phone. Arnold, I need to go. Your mom needs me. Okay. Arnold said. Kelly quickly changed into a normal outfit, grabbed an overnight bag with some things in it, then went to the door. Get dressed for work when it's time and head over to the biology building. She said. I'll call you every day to update you on what's happening, and I'll wait for you to come and visit on the weekend. Hopefully, this will be all sorted out by then. Okay. Arnold said and gave her a 4-second kiss. Goodbye. Goodbye, Arnold. Kelly said and stood there and didn't move. I really don't want to go. Help my mom. Arnold said and gave her a hug and a kiss. I love you, Kelly. Hey Arnold. Kelly exclaimed, dropped her bag and kissed him passionately. I love you, too. Mom needs you. Arnold said. Kelly nodded, grabbed her bag, then left the dorm room at a run. Arnold had a shower and changed for work by putting on one of the suits he and his mother bought for him to wear. With no one else around, he had to check himself to see if he had it on right and everything was straight, and he did his best in the bathroom mirror. He did not have eyes in the back of his head though, so he didn't see the slightly misfolded shirt collar and put on the suit coat. He checked to see that he had his keys on his belt loop and stepped out of the dorm room and locked the door. Well, hello handsome. A female voice said, and Arnold turned around to see nearly the entire hallway was full of women in various states of being dressed. That's a great suit for off the rack. The closest woman said. She was a short brunette with a ponytail and she looked at him from head to foot. Where are you headed? Building F. Arnold said. Huh. I thought new students didn't start until the fall. She said. What are you doing there? I'm working. Arnold said to her surprise, and he started to walk down the hallway. Women in just towels were talking to others wearing just underwear and bras. A few of them were fully dressed and leaned against the wall in the hallway and were talking in a group. If you talked to anyone at all that had seen or watched a movie about college life, then this was a typical female dorm scene. If Arnold cared about such things, it was almost laughable how many half-naked women were between him and the elevator. He had to walk around and by all of them, since his dorm room was at the very end of the hallway and the elevator was on the other end. As he passed each one, some gasped and tried to cover themselves, some gave him surprised looks and were too shocked to bother trying to cover themselves, and most of them just stared at him as if he was intruding on them. Arnold ignored them all and made it to the elevator and pushed the button. He stood there and waited for 3 minutes, then it dinged at him and the doors opened. Oh, late night hottie leaving. One of the 6 young women in the elevator said, and the others with her laughed. Who did you sleep with last night, sweetie? She asked as she stepped out of the elevator. My girlfriend. Arnold said and stepped into the now empty elevator. What's her name? The one who spoke asked. Kelly. Arnold pushed the button for the ground floor. The young woman turned around and spoke loudly. Which one of you is Kelly? We need to talk. Her friends laughed uproariously at her and the elevator doors closed. It stopped at each floor on the way down and Arnold was soon crowded into the back of the elevator as more and more women piled inside. You're a tall one. A woman said from beside him and he looked down at her. How tall are you? I'm 5'10". Arnold said. Were you visiting someone here? She asked, hope in her voice. I live here on the top floor. Arnold responded and every conversation in the elevator stopped and all the women turned and looked at him in surprise. The elevator dinged for the ground floor and none of them made a move to leave, so when the doors opened, he weaved through them and stepped out. Arnold. Have fun at work. Doris said loudly from behind her desk and waved. I'm not allowed. Arnold said and waved back. Doris laughed. Give me a hug when you come back here this afternoon. Okay. Arnold said and walked out of the lobby just as Doris was swarmed by the girls that had been in the elevator and they bombarded her with questions. Arnold walked for the 8 minutes to get to Building F and went inside, walked up the stairs, and went to the professor's office and knocked on the open door. "Ah, Arnold. Come in." Professor Hamel-Krenslav said and waved him in. "Another suit. Excellent," he said. "You are already representing this department well." "What do I need to do this morning, sir?" Arnold asked. "Observation. These new specimens are going to take most of the morning to dissect with all the students here to observe as well," Hamel said. "More people slow the work, but it's worth it if they learn from it." Arnold nodded. "Amy will be here in a moment, so go over to the lab and wait for her." "Yes, sir," Arnold said and left the office and went to the lab to wait. Kelly arrived at the bus stop near the motel Annie was staying at and walked over to the right room and knocked. "It's Kelly." A moment later, the door opened and Kelly saw that Annie still wore the same outfit from yesterday. "You didn't have to come all this way, Kelly," Annie said. "Of course I did," Kelly said and stepped into the room with her suitcase and saw the shower curtain on the bed. "Oh, wow," Annie sighed. "Yeah, this is a great place to stay. Any word from the insurance company?" Kelly asked and put her suitcase on top of Annie's that was on the chair. "If checkout times are the same, we have to be out in an hour." Annie sighed again and sat down on the bed. "Nothing yet, and if I go anywhere, I'll have to call again and leave the new number," she said. "Kelly, we can't go to your parents to stay. That's too much of an imposition." Kelly sat down beside her and took her hand. "Once I tell them what happened, and where you slept last night, Mom is going to drag you into the house to stay in the spare room and won't let you leave." Annie opened her mouth to refuse, then the image popped into her head and she smiled. "There. See? You can still smile," Kelly said and let her hand go, then put an arm over her shoulder. "I'm here now, so you have my permission to cry." "Kelly, that I don't want." Annie's eyes teared up against her will and she started to cry. She covered her face with her hands and Kelly hugged her. "That's it. Let it out," Kelly said and Annie bawled her eyes out and sobbed. Unlike the night before, Annie didn't force herself to calm down after only 10 minutes. She let everything out. Her husband's death, her son being suspended for fighting, her son being manipulated sexually by Heather, Arnold having to shoulder the responsibility for supporting the household, Arnold moving away for years and possibly permanently, and now losing her home after just paying it off. It had been a long and trying time for Annie the last little while and she had repressed almost everything until now. Kelly held her and let Annie cry herself out. It took a while. They went through a lot of tissues and they were both thankful that Annie didn't wear a lot of makeup, because it would have been thoroughly ruined a long time ago. Annie eventually calmed down and wiped her face once more. "Kelly, thank you. You see, I told you I needed to be here," Kelly said and looked at the alarm clock. "It's almost checkout time." Annie took a deep breath and let it out. "All right. Let's head over to your parents and see what." She stopped talking when the phone rang and picked it up. "Hello." She listened for a minute. "Thank God," she said. "Yes. Okay. I'll be right there." "Insurance company?" Kelly asked and Annie nodded. The both of them put the shower curtain back in the bathroom and grabbed their suitcases, put them in the trunk of the car, and went to the office to check out and to get a receipt. Once that was done, they hopped in the car and drove back over to Annie's house. When Kelly saw what had been done to it, it was her turn to cry. She did it silently and took out her cell phone and took pictures, video, and described the sickeningly pervasive smell while they waited for the insurance agent. "It's a lot worse inside," Annie said. Even with a mask on, the enclosed space concentrated it and I gagged. She didn't admit that she almost threw up, though. She was saving that part of the story for the insurance agent. Brad is such an asshole. Kelly said. Is he 12? Adults aren't supposed to do things like this. They hadn't said why they did it last night, so maybe they admitted what set them off by now. Annie said. You think it's the video? It has to be. Kelly said. They were pretty pissed that they couldn't get Arnold back, so they must have come here looking for him. She said. But, Brad shouldn't have known where. Annie stood there and waited for Kelly to make the same logic leap that Officer Holman did.